Well, welcome everyone. My name is Varun Jain. I'm an attorney at K&L Gates. It's a global law firm with 45 offices and about 1,800 lawyers. And yes, that number scares me too. My practice is transportation and emerging technologies, autonomous vehicles, PDDs, drones, and space work, everything from legal to regulatory to policy. I am very, very excited to introduce our panelists. We have a great group for you. First, let me just tell you a little about what we'll discuss, and then we'll get into our terrific panelists. This is about the curb. It's quietly become a very contested space in public infrastructure. Curb isn't just about parking, it's about where delivery competes with ride-hail, scooters, bike lanes, outdoor dining, PDDs, and autonomous vehicles, all operating according to their own rules and speeds. So we'll talk about what that looks like, how folks are using data, how changes in street design are reshaping behavior, where public and private can partner, and other topics. Now, just show of hands, just to get a sense of who's here in the audience, how many folks do we have from government here, if you wouldn't mind raising your hand? Amazing. I was in government. Thank you so much. And then how many folks do we have at not-for-profit? Sweet. And what about the private sector? Excellent. And finally, academia? Great. And then anyone else that we didn't get? Nice, we did it. Okay. Media. Oh, you, okay, where are you from? Ah, media, yes, media, very important. Wonderful. Okay, so now let me introduce our terrific panelists. To your far left, we have Jonny Combe, who's the president and CEO of PaybyPhone, one of the world's leading digital mobility and payment platforms. They operate in 7 countries and serve millions of drivers every day. And they connect people in cities through seamless parking and mobility experiences. And since joining the company in 2018, Jonny has led major growth initiatives across North America and Europe, strengthened PaybyPhone's strategic partnerships, and expanded its role in shaping smarter, more connected urban mobility ecosystems. Thanks for joining, Jonny. Next we have Angel Diaz, who has been a leader in parking management since starting as a parking collector in 1993. With over 3 decades of experience, he currently serves as Chief Operations Officer at the Miami Parking Authority, overseeing operations across the Miami Marlins, City of Doral, and Jackson Memorial Hospital. His responsibilities include managing 180 employees, 14 garages, 60 lots, and 47,000 parking spaces countywide. Mr. Diaz sits on the board of Habitat for Humanity and is also past president of the Florida Parking and Transportation Association. His career highlights include leadership roles in Richmond, Virginia, and Santa Monica, California, where he managed significant budgets and oversaw really large parking operations. Thanks for joining, Angel. Next, we have Dillon, who's a mobility and curbside manager for the city of Minneapolis, where he leads a city strategy for integrating emerging technologies into transportation and curbside management. In this role, he oversees innovative initiatives designed to modernize how cities manage the curb, including Minneapolis's US DOT SMART grant-funded curb management project, focused on building digital curb infrastructure to support dynamic, data-driven use of the public right-of-way. With more than 2 decades of experience in transportation and urban mobility, Dillon has worked at the intersection of policy, technology, and operations to help cities adapt to rapidly changing transportation systems. His work centers on preparing municipal infrastructure for new mobility services, improving curb access and efficiency, and ensuring public space supports evolving transportation needs. Welcome. And finally, we have Kelly Jones, who's the Government Affairs Manager at Serve Robotics, where she works at the intersection of technology, policy, and community impact to advance autonomous delivery across the United States. She partners with lawmakers, regulators, and local stakeholders to develop the frameworks needed for safe, scalable deployment of robotic delivery. And prior to working in the technology industry, Kelly built a career in public service that spans over a decade, serving across local, state, and federal elected offices. Thanks so much for joining. Well, we're excited for a great panel. Now that we know the panelists a bit, why don't we just go around and maybe get a sense a little more about your organizations and the exciting things you're working on these days. Jonny, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So it's really interesting, isn't it? A lot of people, when I engage with them and they find out I work in the parking industry, they think, oh, that must be really dull. Now, normally they don't say that to me directly, But actually, it's incredibly exciting. And so at PaybyPhone, we're really excited. Why are we so excited? Well, one of the reasons is the new opportunities that we are seeing with interesting things we can do with data and how we can use data to solve problems. So I'll give you one tangible example. Probably one of the biggest frustrations, if I was to ask you about parking, would be I never know where to park. I love coming to Miami. We have got quite significant coverage in this part of the state, but finding parking is not always easy, Angel, is it? No. And so one of the things that we've done, we did a pilot project with the city of Paris in France, where we can offer our users real-time availability data to the spot with an accuracy level of over 99%. And so that's just one example of using data, using new AI technologies to help solve, it could be a pain point that our consumers are feeling or a pain point that our customers, our municipal customers, our parking operator customers, universities are feeling as well. So Varun, we're really excited about data. We're seeing it solve real world problems, and there's probably a lot more I could say on that, but I'll hand it over to Angel.
Wonderful. And don't worry, we will say a lot more on data. So,
So for me, I think one of the main things that we're working on now that we've been kind of focusing on over the last few years is just the growth in Miami. As you guys can see, there's a new building being built every time you look out in the skyline, and that growth is just so rapid. And then on top of that, you have the e-commerce, the gig deliveries, and everybody, continues to want services delivered to their homes. But we still have the same streets, and we still have the same number of parking spaces. So our challenge is, how to get, the goods to the people's homes and whatnot, and trying to move the traffic better. So we're working on a couple of things, and one of the most important ones we're doing now is the smart loading zone. So that'll help, with technology, help clear the loading zone space, clear the lane of traffic more real time, and then we can focus our enforcement officers to do other more important enforcement duties instead of just constantly regulating the same loading zone at, basically the whole day. So it's freeing up their time. We're using the data also to kind of understand, is the loading zone being used properly? Do we need to make it bigger? Do we need to move down the street? So that's one thing that before we even rolled out the program, I think we relocated like 2 or 3 smart loading zones because the data was showing that, maybe this is not a good spot for it, so we relocated. So yeah, the data is a big thing, but for us, our focus is just trying to help move the traffic. If you're local, you can understand the traffic here is a challenge. People park, somebody told me, I think yesterday, they put their hazards on and it becomes a parking spot. So I stole that. I don't know who he was, but I stole that from somebody from yesterday. And it's true. That's basically how they drive here in Miami. So although we do parking, at the end of the day, we're trying to move vehicles.
yeah, absolutely. That's great to know. Dillon, did you want to tell us a little bit about the exciting things you're working on?
Yeah, sure. So hello, everyone. Again, I'm Dillon Freed with Minneapolis Public Works. So the division I'm in is responsible for street operations for the city. So very similar role to Angel, except I don't have to deal with enforcement like he does, which is nice. So Minneapolis has seen a lot of growth over the past couple of decades, a ton of housing development and densification throughout the city. We've really rearranged our transportation priorities as well to prioritize biking, walking, and transit over moving cars in and out of the city as fast as possible. And so a lot of that development has been transit-oriented development, which is great for our city. It's helped seeing our population increase quite a bit, and people can get around in a lot of different ways. But like all cities across the country and around the world, really, we've been very disrupted by e-commerce and the rise of smartphones and how people get around the city and how people experience the world. It was kind of, we've done some street reconstructions, and we're expressing our values through our infrastructure, right? So we're deprioritizing parking, for instance, removing parking, and so we're really kind of having to learn through how do we still make our streets function with less parking there. And it was on that backdrop that back in 2022 we applied for a US DOT Stage 1 SMART grant. So for anyone who's not familiar with that program, SMART stands for Strengthening Mobility and Revolutionizing Transportation. So we partnered with CoMotion, Friend, the Open Mobility Foundation, and 7 other cities to apply as a cohort to all have very similar curbside management-oriented projects. We were called the Smart Curb Collaborative. And so Minneapolis had some success in our stage 1 grant. The elevator pitch of our grant is that it was a digital infrastructure project. So we were essentially building out a digital curb map of our project area, installing smart sensor technology, and then utilizing that data to better understand what's happening on our curb, with a special emphasis on solving some of the conflicts that arise with new street designs and e-commerce deliveries. So the SMART Grant program is a 2-stage program. We partnered with the city of Seattle to apply for a stage 2, which is to scale up our prototyping grant. So in our stage 2 grant, we're taking our digital curb map citywide and expanding a lot of our smart sensor technology to additional corridors in the city. So it's exciting to help us learn more about what's actually happening at the curb.
Yeah, that's super cool. And it's nice to see sort of a partnership between federal and state government. Kelly, I'd like to turn it to you next.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Kelly Jones with Serve Robotics. We are the sidewalk delivery robots with the blinking eyes and unique names. Maybe you saw them, out and about while you were in the city. But I first and foremost, what I'd like to say is I'm happy to be here at CoMotion. It's my first time at this conference, and I'm happy to be in Miami. It's also my first time in the city. And I come from LA, where the car is king, and we are every single day trying to navigate congestion, epic events like Carmageddon, and what I work on day in, day out at Serve Robotics is how do we rethink the last mile. And to just give you a little bit of a context about how our technology works, it's food delivery that's happening under a 2-mile radius. And the opportunity for that is because traditional drivers will typically see, typical drivers and food platforms such as Uber Eats and DoorDash, a couple of our partners, see enormous amounts of drop-off when drivers are assigned to these short trips. There's a lack of financial incentive. It takes a lot of time and energy to circle a block a couple times for maybe a reduced tip. And robots don't work for tips. So that's a 20% discount on all of your orders. And that's something that restaurants and customers really enjoy. And at the same time, where we're seeing the public benefits of that is how are we thinking about opening up our streets, reducing double parking and congestion around the 1 or 2-mile radius around some of our economic hubs. So I'm really excited about it, excited to be here and learn more about what everyone else is working on.
That's wonderful. And, we got to mention the safety benefits also, right? Because you don't have a 2-ton vehicle delivering, I think, a 2-pound burrito. Something like that, yeah. She told me that. She told me that earlier, so I feel like I can say it. Awesome. Well, that's a great introduction, and I think these folks have touched upon all of the issues we'll talk about today. Why don't we start with data, which is so interesting and fascinating these days. We know that mobility is changing, and one of the ways it's changing is just reams and reams of data, much more than any one person can understand in a lifetime. Years ago, you'd have to pay someone they'd have a clipboard, they'd go out and they'd see how many cars go by or how many people park, and it's very different these days. There's near constant internet connectivity and a wealth of IoT devices. What role, let's talk a little more about this. What role does this wealth of data play in your day-to-day operations, and what are the results you see? And why don't we start with you, Kelly? Just love to get a sense of how you folks are thinking about it and how you're developing that data and using it.
Yeah, absolutely. We think about data collection in a couple of different ways. It's basic sidewalk telemetry. So thinking about, whether it's broken curb cuts, it's, identifying maybe too narrow sidewalks where we should see widening to improve access. And at the same time, working in partnership with cities through MDS, Mobility Data Specification. We're proud partners of the Open Mobility Foundation to share trip data, real-time fleet information, and that helps cities make better policy decisions, but also at the same time, more strategic and direct investments when it comes to infrastructure repairs. And that's something on a personal level that I'm really proud of, working for this company.
That's wonderful. And Jonny, I'd like to turn to you to also to just provide more context about the commercial use of the data that you see.
Yeah, one of the benefits that we have as an organization is we have this wealth of transactional data, so we know where people are parking, when they're parking, how long they're parking for. And if you take, for example, a city of Miami who are doing, I guess, hundreds of thousands of transactions a week, Angel, then that gives us a very rich data set that we can start to package up in different ways to provide value. So that could be providing value to the city to give them an understanding of different patterns we see in different parts of the parking real estate. It could also be providing value to the consumer I mentioned earlier, the challenge that most of us have of finding where to park. And so really the common theme for us and how we think about data is we want, the role of data is to simplify things. We want to either simplify things for the user, the person who's using the PaybyPhone app, or we want to simplify things for our client, the city, the parking operator, whoever it is that's implemented the PaybyPhone service.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to turn it over to the government folks and get a sense of how you're using the data to simplify, to advance your mission.
So for us, we have a lot of data points. We have the smart loading zone. We have an under vendor called Clever City, where it's a sensor-based technology as well. We have the enforcement handhelds, and they kind of give us some data in the enforcement points, targeted areas. The way we kind of use it is thankfully we have an in-house, we have our own data analyst. He's actually here in the audience. So we meet about every 2 weeks, and then we kind of talk about operations as a whole. And then George, he'll come, with a data point on the smart loading zone or on Clever City, and then we kind of brainstorm with the ops team because they're the guys that are on the field. They've been doing this as long as me, so we kind of brainstorm on, okay, with this data, like, okay, how can we improve the turnovers of the space? Do we lower the rates here, increase the rates there? So we're going through that now to try to, figure out the best way to kind of push cars more towards the outer area and have them walk in. Again, you're in Miami, so that's a challenge. Most people want to park in front of the door, but that's just something that we're trying to improve on, using the data to kind of help make the availability to other areas and not just everybody focusing on parking as close to the area, the destination that they want to be in. So that's one of the things that we do. So the data is rich, and we do use it. George analyzes it, and then we meet as a group to kind of say, okay, so then with this data, let's see how we can improve or use a different technology and things like that. So we kind of use it, and it's basically like a bi-weekly meeting that we have, and just kind of go through it, and then just kind of fine-tune and tweak our operations based on that. And we use it for Doral, we use it for the Marlins, we use it for the county parks as well to kind of better our enforcement coverage, because the county parks, it's throughout the whole county, so we fine-tune that as well. Like, do we enforce in the morning? The boaters, they boat in the morning time, or do they boat at night? So do we enforce as they're getting there, or do we enforce once they park? So just analyzing and understanding when the peak times are to kind of, improve on compliance is kind of what we use it for the most. But it's a good tool, and it is a lot of information. Luckily, we have someone in the house that kind of can cipher through that and kind of produce, okay, this is where we are, and let's see how we can make it better. So it's just become part of our regular process now.
Yeah, that's wonderful and great to hear. Dillon?
Yeah, so our day-to-day is really a lot about generating the data, right? So we've had this wealth of information for a long time, from parking transactions, citation data, things like that. But using the new technologies we're doing with smart sensors, we're getting new types of data, and so we're having to find ways to integrate all that data together. One of the things our Smart Grant project is centered around is utilizing the Curb data specification, CDS, that's shepherded by the Open Mobility Foundation. So using that data specification, we're finding new ways to fit a lot of this data together to have us better, so we can have better insights into what's taking place at the curb. Our project manager for this, John Lundstrom, who's sitting right there, he has this concept that he's developed called the curb zone score that we're trying to develop through use of this data specification. So once you set the parameters of what you want to be happening on a certain section of curb space, we can fold together these different types of data and ultimately come up with a score of how well are we actually meeting the intended use of that curb space. And so that's a cool way that we're using some of this data that we generate.
Yeah. So what are some examples of using the curb space, just so folks here have a sense of it? Is it like, hey, we want to use this primarily for delivery, primarily for parking, something else?
Yeah, and that's a tricky question, right? So that one thing a lot of cities do is, you know, they're like, oh, this section of curb space is for parking, this section is for loading and whatnot. So what we've been doing is taking a look at block by block how the space is used holistically, because a lot of times the loading actually takes place in places where you don't intend it to take place. And so that's one of the things we're really looking at is how well is our allocation like meeting the needs there, and should we be tweaking that allocation to like better get the outcomes we want. So
That's super interesting. And with these, I guess this Open Mobility Foundation standards, are you able to compare with other cities as well?
well, that's kind of the goal.
Hopefully,
Yeah. So we need more and more cities to kind of adopt the use of this specification so that we can both compare and contrast across cities. That's one of the things this concept of the curb zone score would do, would bring a kind of general standard for across different management techniques in different cities. So,
Nice. Well, we know there are a lot of government folks here, so maybe some of them will take you up on that. Awesome. So we've talked a bit about data and some of the benefits of data and how it's being used. I just want to quickly turn to some of the challenges you're facing with data. I mean, you mentioned there's a ton of it, but are you getting enough? Is it the right data? And again, are there interoperability issues? And throw it to anyone to speak about.
Yeah, I'm happy to kick off. I think it's a really good question, Varun, and probably the challenge we face that many other businesses do is we just have so much of it. You know, that there is so much, and almost narrowing down and solving specific problems. I think it's really important, because what we sometimes do in the business is we dive down these rabbit holes and we find lots of interesting things, but it doesn't actually make anybody's life better in any way. But we spend a lot of time and effort looking at interesting things. And so I think that's that's a discipline topic, really. You know, just being disciplined at making sure, okay, we're not just analyzing all of this data for the sake of analyzing it, but we have front of mind a clear problem that we're looking to solve. I would have said probably a couple of years ago, trying to combine structured and unstructured data together was challenging, but now that's become, you know, an awful lot easier. And
AI?
Yeah. I think that's really exciting, being able to combine those types of data sets and do interesting things with them.
That's great. I mean, as someone who had designed databases before I went to law school, and partly the reason I went to law school, that it's great that now it's much easier. So you can actually use the data. And I think, like you're saying, what's the goal, right? We want to help people long term, and this is a great way to do that. Any others? Any other challenges?
I could, not really a challenge. I think it's just to Johnny's point, the data points and what you get, it's overwhelming. I think if you just, I'm an operations guy, so we focus on the operation and then kind of pick the problem you want to solve. Like not try to do everything at once, which sometimes my guys got to hold me back in and say, you know, one thing at a time. Because you kind of, you know, you want to do everything at once. But I think using the data for just, you know, have a few targeted areas or targeted problems that you want to focus on, work those through, use the data for that, and then, you know, move on to the next project. But it's just impossible to do everything at once. So one thing that I think we kind of focus on is try to do a few things at a time, nothing too much or too crazy. You know, make it as best as we can, and then move on to the next project, and then we'll come back and revisit. But I think if you focus on a few things at a time, then I think you can kind of handle the data. And to his point, the AI, also helps make it a lot easier. The reports are a lot readily available. They're sent to you. You can tweak them how you want them or see what you want to see. So it kind of helps that process as well. But I think, because again, everything pretty much today that you use has a data point, and you can gather so much information off of one smart loading zone that it'll blow your mind. So I think just kind of focusing on a couple things at a time, addressing them, using the data to fine tune it, and then you come back to it later on and just like do a check on it. But that's the approach that we kind of take.
Great, thank you. Well, let's turn to the physical now. The urban infrastructure itself, it plays a very large role and is changing considerably, especially as far as what's possible in the last mile. And there are new innovations and trends that people want to experiment with, use, see what works, see what doesn't work. I think AI is accelerating that. It's certainly accelerated that in the SaaS space, and I think at least in my practice, we're seeing it accelerated in the physical AI space as well. And it's an example on what some people want that is maybe a little more traditional, bike lanes, right? I'm from DC, and we've been seeing many more bike lanes go up over the years. So I'd love to hear more from the panelists about what examples of new innovation, changing infrastructure you're seeing in your day-to-day, and how you're using or navigating those changes. Dillon, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure, I'll start. So, yeah, we're widely recognized as one of the best, if not the best, biking city in the country, depending on the year. It's often Portland or Minneapolis that are voted the best bike city. So no shortage of bike lanes in Minneapolis. But there's been a lot of reprioritization of right-of-way to things like bike lanes, like bus lanes, like green stormwater infrastructure, wider sidewalks, and so that's great. It's helping us achieve a lot of our policy goals around what our residents want to live in our city. And I'm from the operations world, so I'll take a couple cheap digs at planners every now and again. Our planners love to gather all the information about what stakeholders are going to be involved or need to be involved around a street reconstruction. And they like to put everything in its neat little bucket when they come up with a design that reflects our policy, right? The world of curbside management is not a neat little bucket. The world of curbside management is a total mess of gray area and how do things get along. So we've had a ton of conflicts that have been created by eliminating parking lanes for prioritization of other uses, and then we're kind of left with that physical infrastructure and trying to sort it out after the fact. And so we certainly are, to some extent, giving a lot of feedback to our designers and trying to inform, reverse inform some of our street design and change how we do some things. But we're trying to utilize some of the new digital tools to better manage the additional what curb space we do have left. And so that's kind of a dance that we are constantly doing and trying to navigate in our city. So that's one of the things that, the promise of some of the smart sensor technology. I think a lot of cities have really struggled to quantify and understand commercial loading activity. We have tons of data about historical parking and how parking has worked, but a lot of cities have not had rich data about how that commercial activity is taking place. And so that's something where, you can't manage what you can't measure, right? So finding ways to better measure, quantify, and determine what the critical access needs are of adjacent properties is really helping us kind of paint a better picture about how we can coexist our values around how we use the right-of-way with the economic development needs and critical access needs of adjacent properties. So,
no, I think it's a great point. I think it's especially, what's really resonates is curbside management is not a neat little bucket. There are just so many things going on all the time. And that's, if you're even thinking about just one sort of subvertical of vehicles that are operating in the space, pedestrians, everything else. So what other examples of new innovation and changing infrastructure are you seeing? You want to go next?
Yeah, I can give an example. So in the city of West Hollywood, there is the Sunset Strip, so Sunset Boulevard, which connects with a street called Holloway. And there are many, many incidents of near misses by cars because of this turn lane from Sunset to Holloway. And what the robots are able to do is collect this real-time information and validate and reinforce the experience and the feedback that residents give their cities. And we can do that in a way by, counting and quantifying these near misses to advocate for fixes and, and all the rest. And what's, safer for robots is, of course, safer for pedestrians. And that's where we're incredibly aligned and work with various pedestrian, and bike advocacy groups to advocate for those changes.
That's really interesting. Awesome. Well, why don't we turn now to something that's near and dear to my heart, public and private partnership. It's these issues are obviously really dynamic issues that no one entity can handle by itself. And I'd love to learn more about how you folks are working together. I think you mentioned some of this already. How do the public and private sectors work together to manage the curb and last mile really effectively? Jonny, I know you do a fair bit of this, so you want to start?
Yeah, sure. We have, I think, probably over 1,000 municipal clients across the countries that we
Just a
operate
few.
within, and yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I feel like for that partnership to work, like any good relationship, it probably needs movement on both sides is one thing, and understanding of where the other one is at is the other thing. So I think probably if I was to speak to the gentleman to my left, and say, hey, look, we've got this great idea, this great opportunity, we do this, we'll have this live in 2 weeks, they would probably think, hang on, you're mad. You have no understanding or appreciation of the context that I'm operating within. And so I think where we've found those partnerships work really well is where there is that kind of mutual understanding of the contexts that we're within and the kind of frameworks that we operate within. I think as well, though, what's really great is if we can have kind of flex on both sides. So typically we've found doing some kind of pilot project is often very effective because it means we can move at a pace which on the private side we're happy about, but it also generates, we're back to data again, that the data points that often the municipality will need to be able to take that from a pilot to something wider than that. So yeah, understanding and bit of movement on both sides, I would say, are the two ingredients we often try and work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in terms of speed, you're accountable to your board, your investors, and they're constantly asking you, what are you doing today, right? So you have to give them answers.
Yeah, we're owned by a New York-based private equity firm who are obviously, renowned for being relaxed and chill and just, do what you can when you can.
Yeah, that's right. So how about anyone else? How can the private and public sectors really work together effectively? And maybe what examples have you seen that you're like, this is a great partnership? And then you can name names. And then you can offer some examples of what hasn't worked, but don't name any names there.
For me, that's what it's all about. Like all the solutions that we roll out it's a public-private partnership. So from our enforcement solution to the smart loading zone to our PaybyPhone app, basically they're all private companies that do a service for us, right, and for the public. Without that, we wouldn't be able to roll out the technology that we want to. Luckily, all of the partners that we've had are open to change, to modifications, to we can't do it today, but we can roll it out in whatever 2 or 3 months or something like that, or at least they'll try. So I think that's really important because again, whatever technology you roll out on the curb, you could plan for it all you want, but until it's installed, you don't know what you missed until it's out there and operational. So to Jonny's point, that's why pilots are good, so you can kind of figure everything out. But yeah, I think the important thing is that it has to be a partnership that both sides are willing to give some, and they're open to tweaking their solution. There's some vendors out there that this is our solution, this is the way it is, and that's kind of how it is. That's more on the garage side, but on the curb, it's been a pleasure. They honestly try to make it better because at the end of the day, if you make it better in this city, then you can take that and distribute it to all the other locations that you have. So that's kind of one of the things that they see as a value add. So we like to do pilots. Again, I always get controlled by my coworkers and staff, like, pump the brakes a little bit. But yeah,
Pun
if the
intended.
exactly. If the partners are good, then you see good results.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate, be flexible, be open to change. I'm reminded that I use this quote all the time, and I'm actually not even sure that the person said it. So it's a Mike Tyson quote, and I think he said something to the effect of every fighter has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, and it's exactly like that with pilots. So you just adapt and figure out how you actually move forward, accomplish your goals. You guys have any other, want to provide any thoughts about working together effectively or areas that you think could improve?
Yeah, sure. So when it comes to last mile logistics, I often say that delivery providers have the gingerbread man approach, the catch me if you can, I'm the gingerbread man. So it's just been easier for a lot of private companies to just take the ticket if you can catch them rather than be cooperative with cities, right? So as part of our Smart Grant project, we have a lot of a huge stakeholder engagement piece to this. And so we've been engaging with the likes of our local FedEx office. They were gracious enough to send a few of our project staff out with some of their delivery drivers. And really what we're finding is that the delivery drivers want to be compliant with things. And whenever they can, they are going to park legally and safely because it's safer for them and more convenient for them. But they also need to make that delivery. So if there's not a loading zone available, they are going to create their own parking spot with their flashers, right? And so finding ways to approach delivery providers at all levels from a way of saying, how can we work together to make this solution has been kind of a refreshing thing that we've been able to do as part of this project. So, I'm not saying that we're going to solve all of the problems, but it's been nice to just have that, not have the first touch point with them be like, you're doing something wrong, stop doing it. It's been more about how can we work together to find solutions. I don't have the solution yet, but at least we're working productively on it.
Yeah, and I'll just say, I tell my clients all the time, listen, when you go in front of a regulator, just know you're a nerd and they're also nerds. So that's like the big thing to really understand with regulators. That's the only reason they're doing this. They can do so many things in their lives. And once you know that, yeah, sure, you have slightly different objective functions, and that makes sense. There's sort of public interest involved, the private interest involved. But a lot of times there's a lot of overlap. But if you just go and do whatever you want, as a general matter, that will not work well for you because they can yank your permit, they can issue enforcement, sanctions, penalties. That's not good for you financially. That's not good for your reputation. And when you're thinking about investing, if I've done due diligence on deals, that's a big question that investors ask. So what's the open liability for violations that they've incurred over the past years? So there's a lot of reasons to actually cooperate with government entities early on. Awesome. Well, it is 12:14. Let's ask one more question, and then we can get some audience Q&A and then have a few final thoughts, if that's okay. So this is a question, we're obviously starting to see autonomous vehicles, and we actually talked about this a little bit in the green room. We're starting to see autonomous vehicles in a number of different cities in the United States and internationally. How are you thinking about managing their effect on the curbside, including parking? And I know you actually are a company that works on autonomous vehicles, so would love to get your thoughts about managing the curbside with autonomous vehicles.
Sure. So I would point out that we are not AVs, so we are technically classified as personal delivery devices. And what that means is the robots are only designated to operate on the sidewalks and pedestrian crosswalks. But we do see a ton of parallels with AV companies in terms of curb management. One solution we're working with right now is to partner with merchants directly about reducing parking challenges during peak times where, this is maybe like a breakfast or dinner rush. This is born out of, I think, the need, especially in LA, where ghost kitchens, delivery-only restaurant options were becoming more ubiquitous during COVID and all the rest. And thinking about how these restaurant hubs manage parking, double parking, idling, distracted driving challenges while creating space to stage a robot, maybe at the front or the back of the house to bring those cars off the road, and also in a discreet and seamless way stage that robot at the restaurant where it's not impeding the right of way. It's respectful to pedestrians and customers, and is something that I think is going to continue to evolve, but is a really exciting solution about how we're just good neighbors and good stewards of the right of way.
That's really exciting. And what Kelly was mentioning is under the Safety Act, the definition of motor vehicle for purposes of whether you're on a road and you're a car or not is like 20 miles an hour. So if you're below that, it's much easier for you to be regulated in a different way on the sidewalks. So what about you guys? How are you guys thinking about autonomous vehicles and how they will affect and change the curb?
Well, first of all, I think they are the coolest thing. I mean, when you get in a Waymo, I have two boys, and the inner kind of 12-year-old in me comes out because I think they are the coolest thing ever. So after the initial kind of rush of enjoying going in an autonomous vehicle, naturally my mind goes to, well, where are they all going to park? And it's interesting, if I think back to prior to joining PayByPhone, I used to work for the BMW group. And so one of the things going through my mind when thinking about moving into the parking industry is, if we look at the main shifts that are happening with vehicles, the autonomous is one, the connectivity that vehicles have, the electrification of vehicles, and different shared business models as well. Those four things generally cover most of the big shifts we see in terms of how cars are used differently today. I think what's interesting is in each of those, parking will still remain a problem that needs to be solved. And so that excites me because we're really passionate about solving problems and trying to do that in intelligent ways. But yeah, for sure, as we see, it's just really interesting how in the last 5 years, the makeup of our streets has changed so dramatically that now it is totally normal that we walk down the street and there's a little robot with eyes and a mouth and a name, and probably if you get too close to it, it will talk to you or something, But yeah, it's remarkable. But one of the things that I think remains is we need to make sure that we can, whether the vehicle's autonomous or not, that we can park these vehicles to ensure that the whole city still flows.
Absolutely.
I'll take it. For me, there's probably two things. So going back to the smart loading zone, so we designated every smart loading zone will have a 5-minute grace period. It's just kind of for a quick drop-off pickup, but it's also for the TNCs, the Ubers, Lyfts. So I would assume the Waymos can also use that. So basically you have 5-minute you pick up and drop off. That should be enough time.
Yeah.
To try to get the space turned over quickly. So that's one of the things that we're doing at the smart loading zone. The other thing, I believe we were approached, or we're talking to, I'm not sure if it's Waymo or one of these companies, to possibly see if there's an opportunity to put an LPR or use their system as an LPR to catch people that are parking on the bike lane, because our bike lanes are not where they need to be. So it's still a work in progress. They're not completely done countywide. So they start somewhere and then they end, and then the bike rider kind of has to figure out where to go next. So, and on top of that, they've become the de facto loading zone for everybody else. Yeah. So that's another challenge. So, and again, our staff cannot cover this whole city efficiently because it's just too big and it's too congested. So we're trying to see if we can possibly use an LPR on those vehicles to kind of drive through the area, a bunch of cars parked in the bike lane.
And for those who don't know, what does LPR stand for?
Oh, sorry, license plate recognition vehicle. Yeah. So the camera, we have them ourselves. We have 6 that our staff uses. We use them in the Marlins as well during events. And they drive down, they pick up the tag, and if it's paid or not paid, then you can send in a citation in the mail. So the bus lane, the traffic lane, and the bike lanes, that's a $124 citation. Yeah. So those are the ones that we need to write more of to help, clear the space and move the traffic. So again, another project that we might want to try to do and pilot is that, because we do see that can definitely help, move traffic better. So that's probably the two things that we're focusing on with the autonomous vehicles.
Yeah, wonderful. Dillon?
Yeah. So of course, for better or for worse, robo-taxis are really driving a lot of the conversation around autonomous vehicles. I second a lot of what Angel says. One of the things we think a lot about, though, is how do we handle these vehicles under temporary conditions, right? Whether it's street reconstruction or construction of some sort that's affecting the streets, temporary conditions there, or a lot of it is around events, right? When there's a major event going on and real crush time things where we need to pull out some unique tricks around curbside management at hooded parking meters or things like that. We really, to double down on the public-private partnership piece, we really need robo-taxis to come to the table to help us manage through that. Sure, there may be state preemption, and so we don't have a stick necessarily, but cities, I think, need to present themselves in a friendly way with a carrot to try to get some cooperation on how AVs will be managed in those crush times in unique conditions.
Yeah, I think there is a longer term stick, right? Because if you're an AV company, and I do tell all my clients this, if you piss too many people off, someone will eventually establish some legislation that prohibits your operation or severely restricts it. And just think long term smart, Awesome. Well, this has been a terrific conversation. I really loved all the insights you folks provided. We have a little bit of time for a Q&A, so does anybody want to ask a question? No? Yeah. Yes, you can. You can ask as many questions as you want, time permitting. And if you wouldn't mind
Okay,
just saying who
I
you
will.
are and your affiliation.
Yeah, my name's Carmen. I'm with PaybyPhone, so I'm not going to ask my boss a question. Kelly, I've been spreading a story that may or may not be a rumor, and you can tell me if it is. In your MVP, did you have eyeballs and names on your robots, or were those added after to cut down on abuse and vandalism?
They started out with eyeballs and names, in fact, and the reasoning is actually scientific. I think it was a Canadian study where child toys would play dead, and the child would be less likely to shake it, or if it just stopped moving. And so I think humanizing, but also making the robots cute and approachable, I think is what builds public trust, support. It doesn't look like something that's law enforcement related or all the rest where you see robotics and drone technologies in that space. But it's a
Yeah.
good question.
I've been telling lies then.
I think Wall-E versus Blade Runner. It's like,
That's
which one
right.
do you want on the
Yeah.
streets, right?
Team Wall-E.
Yeah. Well, I take Wall-E too.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm going to have to change my story because I heard rumor that you didn't start with them, but then you added them. So I'll clear that up. Dillon, I'm assuming that your space sensors are on your loading zones. Are they in any other asset in the city? What type of space sensor? And are they only collecting data right now, or do they have another purpose?
Yep. So our approach with our Smart Grant project has not been to focus just on loading zones, because I kind of mentioned earlier, a lot of the loading actually takes place at places that it's not designated to happen. So we really wanted to have a block-by-block understanding about what was happening, even in the standard parking areas. And so a lot of our sensors are throughout the whole corridor, not just at designated loading spaces. We currently have two varieties of sensors as part of our project, both in-ground sensors and mounted video camera-based sensors, which has been great because we're able to compare those data sets against each other to do some of the ground truthing for us, and it helps us identify some issues. Parts of our project may focus on just having them in loading zones themselves to quantify if we know they're actively used, to just better quantify that. Fortunately or unfortunately, the Smart Grant program prohibits use of this technology we're buying through that for enforcement purposes. So we're not able to do what Angel's doing in in Miami as far as utilizing it for enforcement. But at this point, we're really using it as a way to just help us gather data to make decisions on how we allocate curb space and how we formulate, policies in our city and management practices.
Thank you. Angel, question for you. We know you to be an innovative city. You pilot a lot of different technologies and programs. Yesterday, I heard a stat that only 5% of pilots actually launch into full programs. Is that your stat? Do you have a higher success rate? I thought that was really low.
Yeah, that is. No, oh, sorry. No, it's much higher than that. Like most every pilot that we've launched has pretty much been successful. I'm trying to think of one that failed, but I can't think of one right now. So no, that's weird. That I've never heard that stat. So maybe not in the parking world. I don't know. Or is that a?
I don't know. I don't remember what session
Yeah.
I heard it in or who said it, but it struck me as odd. And then I was wondering if it's because you've got a more clear set of what success and failure looks like and what the outcomes you're looking to drive, or I don't know why you have.
It might be that. I think it's also, again, it's whenever we wrote a pilot, it's a team approach. So you have George, data analyst, you have Henry from IT that's there also. Then you have the ops guys. So, and I got to give credit to Henry. He's there. And because he asked the questions about a system or a pilot that we want to roll out that nobody in the room would even think of. And then you're like, oh yeah, that's an important question. So I think if you have 4 or 5 people looking at the project and just drilling down and asking the questions and understanding, the IT perspective, the analyst perspective, the operational point of it, the installation, can we do it? Is it feasible? So I think if you kind of drill down from the beginning, I think you'll know if it's going to be successful or not. Obviously, once you install it, things change and then you pivot, you tweak it. But I can't say I can't say that we've had many that have really failed. We have some that I can say we've changed. So we have some fixed LPR in some of our facilities that we've changed the vendor, but it's still the same technology. So that has happened. But other than that, I can't think of any off the top of my head. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. Well, I think we've had some great. Oh, yeah, one more. Yes, let's do it.
Hello, this question is for Kelly. Kelly, very familiar with that intersection and many others in West Hollywood, very, very busy. And it's interesting because you can see the robot sometimes trying to cross the street and then coming back like a person, like, oh, I'm not gonna make it type of thing. So the question to you is, what percentage of these trips are fully automated? What percentage are teleoperated? And what is the standard for the industry these days? And when do you guys expect to get as close as possible to full automation?
So they're all autonomous. The robots have a level 4 autonomy capability. So that basically means on the majority of each delivery route, they are operating autonomously. And there is human monitoring when we think of the Holloway crosswalk and other dynamic situations. I think sidewalks ultimately are unscripted environments, as are roadways, but in ways that are so unpredictable. And so having, I think that extra layer of monitoring is important. But the autonomy, I think, is really the business opportunity when it comes to scaling and ultimately, in my mind, how we bring down cost of delivery. And we do that now by reducing the tip. But I think over the long run, we'll see that cost reduced even more. Something our CEO says a lot is, why does it cost $1 to purchase an item from China versus $10 charge from your local Chinatown? And that's because I think we need to figure out how do we innovate the last mile, leverage technology, and that's something that we're trying to do with food delivery.
Okay, I'm getting some information that we can do another question if anyone has one. Yes, sir.
This goes to PaybyPhone. I heard you talk about the gathering of data accuracy, 99%. Can you explain to me what PayByPhone is and how it operates? Because I don't know that.
Okay. So if you want to park your car in Miami, and if you want to pay for that, to make sure that this man doesn't take it away or boot the car, then we're an app that enables that payment. So we help people find parking, pay for parking, and extend that parking session. So consequently, on the back of that, we generate and have a huge wealth of data in our back-end systems.
And Johnny, is it like a QR code, a phone number, anything? Something
Yeah,
else?
so typically you'll punch in a location code, or if you have location services on your phone, then it will know where you are. And you just, with a few clicks, you pay for your parking.
And so I think you're saying you'd...
Public parking, or is that part of the private parking?
Both. Our clients are a mix of public parking authorities, universities, private parking operators, anyone who's got parking real estate, effectively.
Johnny, I think what I'm hearing is he should download the app and try it out. Is that what I'm hearing?
You know, we've found someone. Do you live in Miami or no?
No. I'm in Florida, though.
Okay, you're in Florida, but you don't pay. Okay, we've found one of the 2 in 10 in Florida who don't pay by phone. So
You can tell by my New York accent that. Do you have it in New York?
not in New
Probably
York
not.
City, but we do have in surrounding areas. So we will. Thank you, Varun. We're going to go
You
through
got
this
it.
afterwards.
There you go.
And
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Awesome. Do we have more questions? We have, okay. Perfect.
Here's your chance, last call, any questions?
Okay, well, let me, oh, yes.
Hello, everybody. Great paneling, great discussion. My name is Marco Morlet. I'm the head of robotics of Guidant. We're a small company, startup in Boca Raton. And question for basically Johnny and Kelly. I'm a heavy user of your app. I love it, and I recommend it. I live in Fort Lauderdale. We have a special rate, so it's awesome. Possibly you can extend that rate to other counties. That would be great. Now, Kelly, we have a industrial robotics 4-wheeler, right? Autonomous navigation, which some of the technology that I've seen your robots beautiful. They are really reliable. But how we can integrate with the parking entity, with the app, and with the technology, right? So we can provide more robotics to use cases that today nobody is taking care of. Let me give you an example. We can deploy the robot, right, in a parking lot, check the plates, right? See if it's already over the time, do an assessment, pay or send an invoice to your partner, Angel Diaz, who is next to you, right? You make money, he makes money, and we keep pushing the technology with Kelly.
Fantastic. So, Marco, I think there's probably a lot that we could unpack in that question. I'll just say a couple of comments. So, first thing is, and this is really building on the discussion we had earlier about the private-public partnership. I think what I've observed over the last 5 or 6 years is we're seeing a much increased cooperation between different private stakeholders and the public entity as well. And so that dynamic, I think, is very powerful. We experienced that working with both some city clients in Germany and also a German car sharing provider. Right. The problem they were trying to solve is, hey, people who are using these shared vehicles aren't paying for parking. Right. So we designed a product whereby those vehicles actually pay for parking and the driver doesn't even know it now. Right. So I think the private-public kind of partnership, if we can still call it that, for sure is only going to increase. The second point that I would pick up on, which I think is really exciting, Marco, is again with the use of AI and having agent-to-agent communication and facilitation going on, it means we can automate a huge amount of work that previously was reliant on an individual doing something.
Correct.
But the notion of having an autonomous vehicle go in, read some information, communicate that to maybe pay by phone, we do something with that, maybe send it back to you, one of us sends it to Angel's team.
Right.
That I think is imminent reality now with AI technology, and particularly agent to agent.
Well, happy to move the envelope and start doing business. So
Great.
thank you. Thanks for the panel. I appreciate
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Great questions all around. Let's give our panelists a round of applause. And can I just also say, can we just give the organizers of this event a round of applause? John, Vivian, it's really good, really great, really good. Well, thanks so much, and feel free to come up and ask questions. I know everyone wants to engage.
Thank you. We're going to do one quick panel photo right here in the front. We want everyone to stick around, folks. We have 2 more really engaging panels. The next panel is going to be talking about infrastructure. Then following that, we have a really extraordinary closing panel with the former mayor of Buenos Aires and the former mayor of Quito, Ecuador. So you're going to want to stick around for that. Again, these folks will be available for questions in the back. We will just ask you to please take those conversations outside so we can give our full attention to our upcoming panel. And we'll just wait a moment for the photos and we'll introduce our next panel. All right, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, we do appreciate everyone sticking around. We do have 2 more final panels. This next one is talking about urban infrastructure. It's about the cities for next mobility era. And again, lastly, the last panel is going to have the former mayor of Quito, Ecuador, and the former mayor of Buenos Aires, among others. So we do ask you to stick around for those. Let me go ahead and invite over our next presenters, including Alice Bravo, our moderator.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. All right, we're going to get started. Our exciting panel. My name is Alice Bravo. I'm the president of Alice Bravo and Associates, and I'm a consulting civil engineer, and I used to be the transit director here at Miami-Dade County. So I love this panel because it encapsulates basically everything that a transportation professional has to deal with. So you have some type of system, hopefully it's growing, you have to plan for the future, but you have to keep things running, and you gotta do everything at the same time, and all kinds of people have an opinion as to how you should do things, and you gotta get funding for it and go through a process and plan for the future. And everybody wants to be on the cutting edge, and everybody wants to prioritize customer service. So the question is, how you do that all at the same time. So I'm going to do a quick introduction of our panelists. And so I'm going to start here with Hannah Cockburn, a planner, and she's from the City of Greensboro's she is the Greensboro Transportation Director. Her team is working to make her city car optional through transportation planning and design, traffic operations, safety programs. She is a past president of the North Carolina chapter of APA and member of the TRB. So she's focused on Vision Zero task forces and working to create a coalition with the cities in her area. Thank you. Welcome. All right. We have Andy Bono, the Director of Transportation for the City of Richmond. I like this. We kind of have different sizes and going to hear what you're dealing with. So his mission is to implement safe and healthy infrastructure for all ages and abilities. And he has previously served as the Vice Chair of the American Planning Association as well, and working as the Chair of Institute of Transportation Engineers, Transportation Planning Council, and a founding board member of Mass America. Great, thank you. We have Javier Betancourt, who I know very well. He's the Executive Director of our Citizens Oversight Board, the CITT, and he himself is a transportation planner and has worked throughout South Florida. And his goal as the CITT Executive Director is to advance something we have here called the SMART Plan, Strategic Miami Area Rapid Transit Plan, that focuses on extending corridors from the existing Metro Rail for the region. Then, last and not least, we have Justin Arkin, Director of Business Development in North America Services at Alstom. So he's leading the company's services commercial growth strategy across the US and Canada. And you basically deal with freight, passenger, rail operations, and has extensive commercial leadership experience. So we all think about the future, we dream about the future, and there's all kinds of innovations that we're preparing for and aspire to implement. So the question is, when it comes to that, what keeps you up at night? Hannah.
I'll start for us in Greensboro. The thing that keeps me up at night are crashes, and safety being one of the most important things that we can deliver as part of the mobility ecosystem that we're responsible for. And when parts of that system fail, those are the kinds of things that you lose sleep over.
Safety.
Safety. Yep.
Very important.
I sleep like a baby. But when I sleep, I'm dreaming about all these ways that we can, similar to what Joanna said just now, how to create a place for all ages and abilities, but in particular, how I, as representative of the City Department of Transportation, but then also our entire department, how we can persuade people. Because I want us to change behavior. I want to change your driving behavior when you visit Richmond. I want to change my fellow residents' behavior. I want to do all kinds of things that requires persuasion. So that's something that's always on my mind, whether it's fever dream or I'm at work during the day. That's front and center for me.
Okay. How honest do I want to be here? So what keeps me up at night is the thought of my two 15-year-old girls getting behind a steering wheel and becoming drivers in Miami. It's a very scary thought.
Safety. All right.
And then also starting to date. That really scares them. But honestly, related to this, it's funding. And we never had enough to begin with. We don't have enough today, and seemingly we have less and less of it, at least in the near future, given the mood of the country and our state. So we've made all these promises. We finally, all the stars have aligned on what we want to do, and yet we have less and less money to do it with. And so that's what keeps me up at night.
All right.
Yeah, I would echo Javier's sentiment. Wait till they're 19.
Or 22.
Yeah, it's realizing the vision, right? I mean, so much of all of us in this business, we as an OEM, I mean, we've been watching, right? We're supporting where we can. I mentioned in the green room, we're one of the largest operators in North America of passenger operations. And so we have a number of public partnerships in that space. And, you know, SMART is a really good example. I mean, we know what we need to go do. We're struggling to execute it because we can't figure out how to finance and execute. And that's what keeps me up at night. How do we get to where we're trying to go?
Right. So what I like about this panel, and I'm going to characterize this as in terms of city size, maybe small, medium, large, and something that I learned over my career. Once I was transit director, I got to meet with the transit directors throughout the state, and as we shared stories, I kind of likened a city to a human being. There's a growth curve. So there's things you do when you're a small kid, then you're a teenager, then you're like, oh, I better study and get good grades because I'm going to go to college. And every city thinks it's unique, and what happens in other cities won't work here. But at the end of the day, it is very similar. And you know, first maybe you have suburban sprawl, and that's okay because everybody wants a big backyard. But then that travel time gets worse and starts consuming a bigger chunk of your time, and then maybe moving to the urban core and living in a condo sounds like a good idea because of quality life. And of course, by then, you need mass transit. So I want this session to be something where we share what we've learned in your respective roles and share with other people what to plan for and wherever they are and what they're responsible for, how they can plan for growth. Because at the end of the day, it is very, very similar. And I think an important part is everybody wants to plan for the future, have new innovations, but technology is changing so quickly. You know, you could do a procurement, fund something, and by the time you implement it, you say, wow, this is outdated, I want something new. And hopefully none of you are in that situation. So kind of let's start pie in the sky. Future mobility solutions, what do you aspire for your particular jurisdiction?
Sure. So one of the things we're working on right now with a research partner at a local university is deployment of a range of sensors in intersections that will help us simulate and understand what the business case is and start to build the argument for the deployment of smart infrastructure in all of our intersections. We're in a really complex environment in North Carolina where I, as the municipal representative, own and operate over 500 intersections inside the context of the IT for the state of North Carolina that operates hundreds more intersections, and they all are interspersed. So they all have to work together. So it's not even just me having to figure out how to buy these things and deploy them. I'm having to do it with partners who are sometimes really reluctant to do that.
Okay.
The future of mobility for Richmond is, while it will incorporate emerging technology and stuff that hasn't even been invented yet, I'm most interested in these legs that we keep getting born with. I want Richmonders to use their legs. Like, walking is the primary mode of transportation. So I want us to be convenient and easy to walk. And this is connected to our version of innovation, at least for the foreseeable future. While there is a lot of product innovation and service innovation going on, Richmond Department of Transportation is going to be very focused on psychological innovation. I want to figure out ways, learning from other industries like advertising, psychology, sociology, behavioral economics, why people make certain decisions the way they do, learn from those use cases that have nothing to do with transportation necessarily, and apply it to transportation. So one example related to walking is we're going to be working on a pedestrian safety master plan this year, and transit will play a huge role in it because I want Richmonders to be thinking of the bus as an extension of a walking trip. It's not an alternate mode, it's just part of a walking trip. So that's the type of psychological innovation that I want us to have where everything is reframed, or not every single thing, but many of these issues are reframed so people don't have to think twice about the built environment or where to lock up their bike or which streets are easiest to ride bikes to get around, but just everything will be intuitive.
So this is a little off theme for this particular conference because this is all about innovation and technology and shiny new things. And we love that in Miami, if you've noticed. We like shiny cars and shiny fashion, and we're very open to innovation and technology, as we should be. But what I would love to see is for us to go back to the basics and get the tried and true right. And we have a good transit system, but compared to our peers, I think we're well behind where we should be. We're well behind where we want to be, and it's even more true when it comes to bicycle pedestrian infrastructure. And I think we can apply technology and innovative solutions to those things, but I don't think that some of these innovative concepts are the solution for moving mass amounts of people. We need mass transit. We need, whether it be Metro Rail or some other technology, we need basic bicycle, pedestrian, micromobility infrastructure, protected bike lanes. And yes, you can apply innovative solutions to make those things happen or make them more efficient or make them safer. But some of these technologies I'm learning about are not replacements for those things. They can just help implement them or make them better. So I'd love to just get the basics right here in Miami.
Yeah, I think, and I'll talk about the Florida operations for us. So we operate the APM in Tampa. We have Orlando. If you've flown through those airports, you've ridden on one of our people movers right here in Miami. But Sunrail is probably the most relevant example because we've been a partner with the state since the beginning of that railway in 2013. And so we've been able to watch that railway grow, and it was a transit-oriented development project. And so one of the things that really jumps out is, if you're familiar with what we call TOD or transit-oriented development, especially in commuter rail applications, they're typically using some portion of freight railroad because it's cheaper than building new railway. And maybe that train goes close to where you want it to go, but oftentimes it does not. And so we suboptimize the ability for riders to access the train without having to multi-mode their way to it. And just kind of spending the last day and a half here, it's really, really interesting to see the micromobility technologies evolving around that. Because to your point, there will always be a need in cities for linear transportation networks, right? Whether those are rail or guideway systems. But how do you get the people? Nobody wants to have to think about, I need to take an Uber to get to the train station and then get on the train. And then when I get off the train, how am I going to get to, it's that mobility as a service concept. And that's something that we spend a lot of time thinking about. Admittedly, we have partnerships in a number of those kind of adjacent markets, but that's not our business. But it's very interesting for us because we do look at mobility as a service, and we're always thinking about how do we create the ridership experience so that it's easy to use mass transit versus, all of the conversations in this room have been about how do we get people off the road and how to get rid of parking lots and make it easy to use mass transit. And that's, at the end of the day, how do we get more people onto the train when they're coming from places that make it difficult to get to that train?
And I think you're hitting the nail on the head. Throughout my career, I've heard people say, "Oh, we gotta force people to use transit." It's like, no, this is United States of America. You can't force anybody to do anything. You can make it attractive, compelling, time savings, clean, safe, and reliable. So as we talk about this mobility ecosystem and interconnected with all these modes, I'm curious from each one of you what your vision is of that definition. And I'm going to save you for last, and I want you to add to it what's cutting edge, what's coming in the future, what's in that Alstom R&D that you're allowed to talk about. So,
I think that ecosystem is really the right terminology, because when you look at the opportunities in your individual communities, you have parts of it that are thriving and parts of it that might need some assistance, parts that might need to be trimmed back. So it's really about making sure that people have choices that they can actually see themselves using in a realistic way, and that we're exploring all of those different avenues, because every trip the beginning and end are going to be different, and you need different tools, and then being able to scale those as your community continues to grow. You know, Greensboro, in large part, is very suburban, and the kinds of solutions that I need to serve those more suburban areas look different than downtown Richmond.
I would characterize ecosystem, well, I would take the whole topic in the realm of freedom, starting with individual liberty. So Richmond is a Vision Zero city and a complete street city. So like many others in the US, that jargon just simply means all ages and abilities should be able to move around safely. All ages and abilities should be able to get around however. So we'll always accommodate some type of motor vehicle. You can own, I don't care if you own a fleet of cars, but everyone should be able to move around safely, whether they're walking or riding a bike or a skateboard or some other technology that has not yet been invented. And when all of these things are provided in such a way that it's safe, that naturally means you have to do things like reduce the speeds of motor vehicles. So I can talk about that, you know, whether it's a community meeting or in front of politicians with shoulders back and standing up straight, like, absolutely, I'm going to slow you down. I don't have to be bashful about that, because it's not just about high speed moving through a system. It's everyone should be able to move safely through a system, and by any means that they have. The big thing related to just what's always on our minds for Richmond that's directly related to safe streets and a variety of options for getting around is land use. I can't control land use. I'm fortunate in Richmond that we're an old enough city that a lot of things were built while it was still legal. And then for the last 75 years, you know, it's illegal to have a townhouse next to a single family house. It's illegal to have a coffee shop on the same street as residents. It's illegal to have all the stuff close together that we want to have close together. So part of our work, even though we're transportation professionals, is to be in the ear of our peers in the planning department, rattle cages anytime we can. We're going through a rezoning process right now, first time in 50 years, so that our city will legalize all of the land uses close together, so that walking is convenient, taking the bus is convenient, riding bicycles is convenient.
And we went through that here 15 years ago.
We're still going through. So Alice introduced me as a transportation planner. It's actually not completely accurate. I'm an urban planner who actually started his career in land use and then economic development. And I've always been passionate about transportation, so this is now where I'm focused. And it's frankly where I think we get the most ROI, right? Especially in Miami, where I think that's our Achilles heel right now, where we're furthest behind. But I still think like an urban planner. And to me, one of the frustrating things as an urban planner is that we continue to work in silos, right? Across industries, transportation, you know, we're getting better at working within the transportation ecosystem, but still not working well across other, you know, subject areas, such as land use, such as affordable housing, such as economic development. And so, you know, every kind of sector is doing its own thing, and then public, private, and nonprofits are kind of all doing their own thing. And then at the geographic scale, we're really bad at working across our region. We don't tend to think regionally. And I started my career at the Regional Planning Council. If anything, we've become, you know, even weaker working as a region through changes to growth management law. And so, you know, I think we just need to be better at working across industries, across sectors, and across our geography. You know, part of our funds go to each of our 34 municipalities, and it's challenging to advance mobility solutions in a place where you have 37 different transit systems. You have Miami-Dade Transit, you have SFRTA, which runs Tri-Rail, our commuter train, you have Brightline, which is this wonderful private passenger rail service, and then you have 34 municipalities all running their own little individual transit systems. So, you know, how do you connect that through technology? How do you connect them physically? You know, all these things are really challenging, and I wish we would do a better job as a community of working across those different silos, whether it be geographic, industry specific, what was the third? I forget at this point, but across sectors as well. I think we're making, you know, we're taking some steps in that direction, but it's slow moving. It's why I love what we're doing now with transit-oriented communities. I know we've evolved from transit-oriented developments to communities, And in those specific kind of areas, we are doing a lot of that. How do we broaden that, to be more effective?
Yeah, maybe along those lines. I mean, from an original equipment manufacturer, we make the stuff and we deliver the systems.
OEM.
Yeah, an OEM. Alstom as a company, we're somewhat mode agnostic in the sense that we make all of the different types of linear transportation technologies. But one of the things that we see time again, particularly in the US, is the lowest first cost drives the decision. And I think you could look around, here in Florida and around the rest of the country here and find a number of examples where the lowest first cost solution costs more money over time and suboptimizes the return on those investments. And I say along those lines because here in South Florida, the absence of that regional transportation authority, you can see the impact that has here, if for any other reason than to stall the investments that we know we need to make. And from our perspective as an OEM, we look at that and say, well, geez, if the United States could solve that problem, that would go so much further to accelerate all of these transportation opportunities that we see around the country. And Florida is a terrific use case for that, right? I mean, this is the highest ingress state, I think, from more people. I think 1,000 people a day are moving to the state of Florida, right? It's hard to get your head around that. But if we don't start doing things soon, 95 is not going to get any better, right? We need to find ways to move forward and get people off the highways, stop driving cars, get people in a position where it's easy to use mass transit.
Right. And just a little page from the history book. We in Miami are very, very lucky. In the late 1970s, the Metro Rail was planned, and this downtown people mover was planned when the population here was less than 1 million, and now we're almost 3 million. And at the time, that project was criticized nationally as a waste of money. And why do we need that? And they were brilliant. They planned a special zoning designation around the stations called the Rapid Transit Zone to allow high-density developments by the county, even if it was in a municipality that was maybe anti-density. And for decades, no one thought to build around these stations. And now it's like wildfire. Traffic finally reached that pain threshold where people are like, yeah, and any unit that's built around these stations just flies off the market. So that took a lot of vision in the late 1970s to plan and invest in this. So all of you, as you look into the future, what's an effective way to get your current day planners to plan for something that's going to happen decades after they're in their job or in office?
I think that really underscores the importance and value of tying policy development to your long-range plans. We do long-range plans. We just finished one that looks out into 2050. And the first comment we got from a board member when we brought it to present was 2050 is a long time away. And, you don't know how much money you're going to have in 2050. It's like, no, we don't. But there's so many things that we need to do today that in order to achieve those broader goals of 2050, that, it's important to articulate why looking that far out really does matter, and tying that back to some of the policy decisions like the zoning, like controlling land use, focusing on TOD development. You may not see a payoff right away, and being able to battle back some of that criticism. And we talk about it. We have a TOD story in Greensboro that is centered on our transit hub that connects our rail system and our regional bus system, some of the inner city systems to our local system. And across the street are 4 square blocks that are now vacant. And it is a huge opportunity. So what we talk about right now is keeping us from doing something dumb so that we can take the time to do something great instead.
For thinking about the future in Richmond, we've gone in about a 10-year window, we'll have gone from close to 0 bike lanes to well over 100 miles of bike lanes. And we've got, also in the last 10 years, 0 expansion for car infrastructure. We're just rearranging street space as best we can because we want, this gets back to what I was saying earlier about psychology. We want our city to continue growing, so we want to provide for an opportunity for more people. It's a geometry puzzle. We're not going to be demolishing buildings to expand roads like most of the counties and states have done for the last 75 years across the country. So how are we going to move people around? There's only so much space. It's a geometry puzzle. And so one of the exciting things for planning for the future is going to be getting to grab that third rail that is parking. And there were several conversations already that just out in the halls and outside and then also on stages that reference parking. And that's going to be probably one of the biggest issues for Richmond. Where are your values? You keep telling us that residents keep saying we want a walkable, bikeable city. All right, where are we going to put these things? If you want space for a sidewalk, if you want space for a bike lane, then where does parking go? I happen to know, like most American cities, there's plenty of places to store your car. But it's this going back to people's own values. These are your stated beliefs. Great news, there are opportunities to align the infrastructure with your stated beliefs. You're going to get what you want. We've got to look for ways along the way to avoid that natural sense of loss, that human beings hate losing something. And so flipping that narrative around from, I lost a parking space, to I'm gaining such and such, and coming up, like articulating what those things are. So for the merchants, it's I'm gaining money. I've got wallets moving in at the speed of walking and bicycling and busing, and those wallets go in and out of stores more often. This is fantastic. I forgot that we even used to have free on-street car parking. So I think that's probably, for planning for the future, the thing that in transportation we can most heavily influence, since we can't absolutely control the land use decisions that are made locally. We can at least capture territory for the great kind of infrastructure within city limits.
So at risk of wading into politics here a little bit, I think there are some structural issues here that creates challenges for us in Miami-Dade County in terms of long-term planning, not just for transportation, but for across different areas. And I think part of it has been the term limits. They were first imposed at the state. We now have term limits for our county commissioners. And what that results in, I mean, you could debate whether that's positive or negative. I'm sure you can make a case either way. But one of the consequences of that is you now have elected officials who aren't thinking beyond 4 8-year terms. And as we know, a lot of these things require 30 to 40 years of thinking and investing. And so our elected officials, and you could see this, again, first at the state and now more locally, they're impatient. They want quick wins. They don't want to think about or plan for things that aren't going to be around in their 4 or 8-year term. That's just what happens, whether it's intentional or not is kind of a moot point. And so I have seen, again, a degradation in our long-term planning here, both locally and at the state level, where they've weakened growth management laws and other things. And it may be as a result of that. I don't know how you fix that other than maybe, reversing term limits. And then the other component here is funding. So, I'm a planner, I love to plan, but we really need to tie planning to implementation. And implementation, obviously, is dependent on funding. And so it's great to plan and make all these promises, but if you're not willing to invest what's necessary to make those plans a reality, then you're just making false promises and you're going to erode trust. And so, I think that as you plan, the officials, the leaders of our community also have to be willing to make the necessary investments to pay for what we need. Not just here's the funding and figure out what you can do for that amount. No, here's what we need to do, right, to be competitive in this economy with our peer cities and regions, and then figure out how to pay for it and be creative in finding those funding solutions.
Yeah, I think on the maybe the topic of term limits, a different way to solve that problem, and I mentioned the regional transportation authority approach, right? From my perspective, our perspective, I think taking those decisions and ability to say, I want to go left or I want to go right out of that environment, and giving, and it's whether it's FDOT or some other regional transportation authority, that independent autonomy to make those decisions independent of the local politics and everything that comes along with that, I think goes a long way to speed that up. Just a couple points on that. We looked at, for those of you in the business here following the funding, right? Because it's always about the funding. When IIJA came out and the billions of dollars were flowing from the federal government, we looked at, like most vendors, OEMs in that space, where is that money going to go, right? How's it going to get there? And a couple interesting things came out of that exercise. One, we figured out, and kind of knew this intuitively, but we quantified that the typical mass transit investment project, in particular for brownfield, right? So I have an old system, I want to modernize it. 10 years from the time that the public agency says, hey, you know what, we need to go do this thing, to the time that, not the project's complete, but to the time that the money and notice to proceed has been issued. 10 years. That's crazy. Right?
That's kind of fast, actually.
I know, right? That's the sad part.
Lightning
right?
speed.
I think the second thing that we see that everyone's still struggling with today, and IIJA was a really good highlighter to this, is even when the federal government has the opportunity to dump disruptive cash flow into the mass transit environment, at every level underneath that, the procurement laws and restrictions on how that funding can be accessed wasn't changed at all. And so what we saw was buckets of money across the United States being available, but no one being able to go and access it in a meaningful way in any relative time horizon that would impact us.
Nobody was shovel ready.
Yeah, because you just couldn't do it. And that's working for a company like Alstom. We're a global company, right? 83,000. We're in 63 countries around the world, but our headquarters is in Paris. And the Europeans look at this as like, what are you guys doing? Just go do it. We need to figure out how to be, I wouldn't say it all the time, but more like that in this sense. We know what we need to go do. How do we solve the problem of going to do it?
Yeah, I think that point of modernizing procurement systems is such a huge challenge, because the feds are setting a lot of this. A lot of those rules have been in place for decades and decades. And so unpacking and reforming that is a huge challenge, and there's really not a lot of capacity at the federal level at the moment to even contemplate that.
If they're even interested.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it's something that just has to change across the board holistically. You see all these new buildings going up. When you go inside, let's say you go to the bathroom, you turn on the water, there's water. So somehow all the water and sewer infrastructure quietly gets upgraded in the middle of the night. 60-inch force mains are replaced with 120-inch force mains, and you always have those services ready when the buildings are ready to move in, but not transportation. So it becomes opinions, political, the process, and it should keep up with the growth of the cities, just like the other infrastructure does.
Yeah, I think one of those challenges is the visible versus invisible component of those. Those are critical services. If your water goes out, you're going to be really unhappy. But because transportation is so highly visible and has all these intersections into the other parts of your life, people have really strong opinions about how it should be done.
Yeah. Well, so we talked earlier about how do you design the system that is attractive to customers. And often we hear a customer-first mindset. And that could mean a lot of different things. So I'd like to hear from each one of you what that means to you, and what do you do in your planning for the future and the integration of your systems to try to have that customer-first mindset.
So in Greensboro, we've taken that to mean that what Andy talked about, that sense of freedom is a core principle of being customer first. And that means that we need to design our services to promote and facilitate that freedom. And when you do that at the highest level of the types of services you're doing, that needs to then trickle into everything else so it all can hang together. Because it's no good if you've got 15-minute service to a bus stop that is just a sign in the grass. You know, there are so many other integrated infrastructure needs that you really have to do all those things together. And it's about the funding for the services and the vehicles, the equipment that you need. It's having enough maintenance materials. You know, we were talking a little bit about just, you know, being able to procure all of those things. How long it takes right now to buy a bus in this country is kind of stunning. So all of those things have to be considered together, and lining them up, just like your example of water. You know, when the building's open and you turn on the tap, you need to have the water there. You need to have the transportation assets there too.
All right, and the customer first mindset.
So customer service, so this is my happy place, because our goal is human flourishing. So if I want human flourishing, if the entire department wants human flourishing, then of course we need our customers, human beings, to be in great shape. We need them safe on the streets. We need them to be able to have the freedom to choose to get around however they want to get around. And this comes out in lots of, it's big abstract ways, like getting people to, like blowing their minds about what could be in the city of Richmond, how easy it actually would be to hop on an e-bike and get from this side of town to that side of town, and the hills are erased, and it's easy peasy, and you're not sweaty. But it's also the little things, like it turns out we had a 311 intake system that was setting us up for a fight with customers all the time. And it was little nuances, like people were prompted to ask for something like City Hall was a vending machine. Like, where's my stop sign? Where's my such and such? I want a traffic circle. I want all these things. And then the answer is no, or they don't hear back right away, and they start kicking and shaking the vending machine. Like, that city sucks. It's never giving me what I want. And it's because our own intake system was set up to do something that we're not going to do. We're not a vending machine. And so we tweaked that, but the way we tweaked it was cutting it out. Like, no, you can't ask me for that stuff. You can't ask for something, a new shiny object. Focus on the problem. So one way of flipping that narrative to help people see we're making customer service so much better, rather than putting duct tape over your mouth and saying, now ask me a question. We're saying, you have so many ways to communicate with us, but please focus on the problem. What is the pain point? So if I can channel, and I'm saying I on behalf of the whole city, of course, but if we can channel people to focus on the problem, then we can help direct them to either a solution that will help develop, or it's something that's, maybe there's a project that's already in the pipeline that they had no idea about. There's all kinds of avenues that could come out of that. But so much of it, I find, starts with what actually is the pain point. Focus on the problems. Don't come with a shopping list to say, here's the thing.
So we're not an operator, so I'm going to come at this a little different, but I tend to believe that no one knows what a customer wants better than the customer. And we don't always do a great job of engaging our customers, our riders, or our would-be riders. Yes, whenever you do a plan, you know, there's some community engagement activities, but I think it's generally lacking. And so one of the programs we developed at the CITT that I'm really proud of, and I had the idea, but Cheryl Mizell right there with the phone in her hand is the one who actually built it from scratch. It's pretty innovative. It's called the CITT Ambassador Program. So we're supposed to be an oversight board, and yet we're 11 people in my office. You know, we could only ride the system so much and literally have our own eyes and ears on this enormous system. So we actually developed a program where we recruit riders of the system to be ambassadors. Our goal was to have at least one ambassador per bus route, per municipal route, per station. So we figured about 300 ambassadors in all. Once you're approved to be an ambassador, you have access to an app. So this is where the innovation and technology comes in. And that app was developed by a great partner called Velocia. Velocia, and our transit riders then provide regular feedback via that app. They're given a series of questions, and there are some open-ended fields, and they tell us what they're observing, what they're experiencing, good, bad, or indifferent. We then feed that information to the Department of Transportation and Public Works, which runs transit, and to our 34 cities, in the hopes that they will take that information and actually make improvements. But the unique thing about it is every time an ambassador submits that feedback, they get rewarded with points. And then they can exchange those points for rewards, whether that's free or discounted Uber or Lyft rides, someday I hope discounted transit, and now we're opening that up to all sorts of other rewards. So it's incentive-based. It also gamifies the system. The ambassadors compete to see who's going to be the ambassador of the month, the quarter, and the year. We recognize them in various ways. So they're incentivized to do this. The information is helpful. It's proactive. It's not reactive. If you're waiting on someone to just call 311, by that time they're having a problem. They're only going to give you the bad news. This is a better way of capturing the larger experience. Even commendations, which we receive a lot of. We also give them points when they participate in focus groups. We'll give them points when they push out a social media message that we're trying to get out. Right? Someone is much more likely to click on something if it comes from their friend than from the Department of Transportation and Public Works. So, all of this, and it's done very cheaply. And again, it's through rewards. We're not paying them to do it necessarily. There's, a small cost associated with it, but it's been very successful. And it's something that I think is fairly innovative. And just an example of how you can use technology, not just to move people, but to engage your customers and get them to be your advocates.
Yeah, so we have, we use the term passenger experience, right, inside of our company, and that has different meanings depending on what's, in our systems and infrastructure business where we're building stations and platforms and, all of that. There's a group of people inside of Alstom and their passenger experience, ergonomic engineers and civil engineers that look at those aspects. In the vehicles, same type of thing. We work with customers to develop the experience that customers want on their vehicles. There's a lot of customization typically in all commuter and passenger and transit equipment to meet the specific requirements. But in the operator context, it's safe, reliable, clean, right? It's all the things you would expect, but we do take that very seriously as an operator because we understand if people don't want to ride the train for whatever reason, if it's not clean, if they don't feel safe, if it's not easy to get to, then they're not going to come back, and that's not certainly good for our business and not good for our business partners. We're operating for public agencies, so we spend a lot of time thinking about that, and we try to be the best there is at it.
At the risk of making this a customer service session for the rest of our time, one other thing that we're doing with we have an entire community engagement division just within transportation, but it was striking me while all of you were also talking about this, that it's at the core, whatever mode we happen to be focused on, if you're a consulting firm or a vendor or you are working for an agency, so much of this comes down to just how the average person thinks and sees their world. So even the way with our engagement, our plan is to educate first, engage second. Like we want people to understand a thing before a project happens to them or they feel like a project happens to them. And so sometimes that's just good old-fashioned neighborhood association meetings, but then sometimes it's working, like you said, through other partners so that it's not City Hall telling you to do something or inviting you to a meeting, but it's local nonprofits, it's business associations, it's other groups who people are already following, it's influencers, to both teach people about certain topics and then pull information out, again, borrowing from proven methods from advertisers and marketers and psychologists to figure out how can we capture people's attention and then get them to do a thing, and then also capture people's attention and help them to learn about why we're rearranging street space. So then it's not so much of a confrontational street fight, it's let the residents gang up on that NIMBY on the block and say, no, you don't understand. The bike lanes are gonna be fantastic, or this bike corral at this intersection is gonna be fantastic.
So I want to talk about pilot projects, because to some extent or another, you've all talked about getting people to change their behavior, persuading them, attracting them to a new system. So I'm curious if any of you, what your opinion is about pilot projects. How do you prepare for it? How do you get funding for it? And does it help move the needle overall?
I
think one of the most successful pilots that we've engaged in was in partnership with a university partner. We deployed the very first AV transit service on public streets in North Carolina. We did it for a very short window of time, less than a month, and in that month, really a narrow number of days of service. But the whole idea of it was to provide the public an opportunity to see and touch and participate in an autonomous vehicle service and get their unfiltered before and after responses to, you know, did riding on this change your perception of the safety of AV? Would you do it again if this service was advanced and became something available to you? Would you ride it? And where would you want to be able to go on that kind of service? So I think pilots are an essential part of advancing our work and bringing the public along with us. But it is such a challenge to get the funding for that. It's so difficult because that's not how the systems are, it's not how the funding's designed. So having a university partner has been really critical for us to be able to do that because they're good at getting into those modes of this is a research dollar, here's some money from the National Science Academies. Like there's so many, it opens our world to different funding streams that we don't normally get to see in the Department of Transportation.
Richmond's doing a lot that's some of that would be considered a pilot project of so like a type of technology in the traffic signal system that's new. We'll try it. But another very visible kind of thing that we like to do, number one, because it's a quick way to make the streets safer, but number two, because it's visible, and to your point earlier about politicians want quick wins, paint and flex posts. I mean, nobody wants to make their build a plastic city, but paint and flex posts can do a lot. So we use them as quick build projects. Sometimes we call it a pilot to test, like, you know, let's see what happens. I mean, if you're in the transportation business, you know what's going to happen. You know a road diet's going to calm people down, and you know a road diet's also going to give people more options to either, if you make a bus lane out of it, more people are using the bus because the bus isn't stuck in traffic. So we know generally how these things are going to go, but in certain neighborhoods where they swear, you know, Richmond's different. Richmond's not like any other city, so will this actually work? So we have these quick builds where we'll use paint and posts to capture the territory and say, let's see how this goes. And then, surprise, surprise, years later, these things are still there. Or, you know, we capture the territory quickly, we see quickly, oh, this is working. Let's get some funding, let's line up with some grants so that we can harden this. So then instead of it just being a paint and flex post type corridor, now we have nice landscaped separation between cars and bike traffic. So we're absolutely using quick build or pilots any which way we can.
So it's a way to get the camel's nose under the tent.
Exactly.
So behind most opposition is fear. And what people fear the most is change, especially at a large scale. And so, you know, I fully believe that you should live with someone before you marry them, you know, and because that's a long-term commitment. And these major infrastructure projects are long-term commitments. And people are going to be less willing to make that commitment if they feel like, you know, they're not able to change course early on without too much pain. So I absolutely love pilot projects and demonstration projects. They allow you to experiment, and they allow, they kind of lower the temperature because, you know, this isn't anything permanent. We're going to try it out. If it doesn't work, you don't have to fear it. On the other hand, I have been involved in a couple of pilot projects that have backfired. And so you have to be careful how you structure them and not set it up for failure. So as an example, and this was wearing a different hat, we worked with the city of Miami to create a complete streets project as a pilot project. Everyone knows what a complete street is, right? You take 3 lanes that were all for single occupancy vehicles, and you change one to a bus-only lane, one to a bike lane, and leave the cars with 1 lane. We thought it was a great idea. We're like, this is going to prove that this works. Well, because it was only 1 block as a pilot project, what it demonstrated to the people using it, the people who are frustrated now because they're only sitting on 1 lane of traffic, that they're looking around and they don't see any buses in that bus lane, or definitely don't see any cyclists on that bicycle lane. It's because it's not connected to anything. Like, if you can't prove that a bicycle lane is going to work with 1 block. No one is going to use it. Certainly not at the numbers you would expect because it's not part of a larger system. And so all that did was prove to people, the naysayers, that it doesn't work. So you have to be careful in setting these up that you don't, accidentally set yourself up for failure. So really think through them. But all in all, I think it's a net positive, and certainly allows you to experiment and prove the concept.
And note to self, maybe don't do that pilot project on the street where a major law firm has their offices.
Yes. Yes, influential law firm.
Sounds like that actually happened. Yeah, so we're it's interesting. We're kind of on the other side of all of that, right? So when you ask that question to a supplier, and we are involved in a lot of technology pilots because that's the business we're in. And, I can tell you, from our perspective, what makes for a successful pilot is very clear, very well-defined objectives for that pilot project. Too often, not so much anymore, but over the years, I could point to a number of pilot programs that seemingly go on forever because, technology's cool, technology's great. Technology for technology, you can spend a lot of time and money fooling around with it and never get to, was it a success? Should we move forward? Or kill it and move on, right? The kiss or kill concept. And I think from the lessons learned over the years working with customers on technology deployments and pilots, that's the key to success. Before we sit down and decide we're going to go do it, what are we really trying? What's the problem statement? What means success? What's the timeline to define it? It can't be forever. And then, all of the economic inputs to that, right? Because at the end of the day, pilots cost time and money, and there's no quicker way to get people upset, right, than to spend more money than they thought they were going to spend, right? So,
well, I'm going to jump on something you said there.
Sure.
Because you talked about technology and tech, and we've talked a lot about infrastructure, lanes, trains, et cetera, but let's talk digital, apps, software, systems. How do you deal with the evolution of that and tie it to funding streams and procurement timelines?
Yeah, I think that remains a huge challenge for public agencies because technology is moving so fast, because the kinds of data that we're getting, like sometimes it feels like we are drowning in data and don't have a good way to create a lifeboat. So for us, making sure that we're going into procurements with some open flexibility, which has become very difficult to achieve depending on the funding that you're using, but also understanding that there are times where it's not working and you need to just be able to cut bait, and making sure that our procurements are structured and our contracts are structured in such a way that you can still do that and not end up writing a big check at the end.
I don't know about all these complaints about procurement. I finally got my IBM 486 delivered, so.
Did it come with the floppy disks?
Oh, yeah. So there's a couple, I think we're, like any city, we're looking for ways to incorporate emerging technology that, like cameras on the front of buses. We're helping our local bus system to, first it was at the state level, we're giving information to lobbyists and other people advocates who need to inform politicians about why cameras in the front of the buses to give tickets to people who are parked in the bus lane. Like, if the bus is convenient and reliable and frequent, it's an express sidewalk. Don't park on the express sidewalk, just like you wouldn't park on the sidewalk. So that's an important kind of technology. So we absolutely want to do what we can to roll out the red carpet for that kind of technology. But then there's loads of other types of technology that, because we can't change the bureaucracy that is local government in the US, what we can do is have a very good on-call consulting culture. So if we have staff who are really good at overseeing consultant teams, and let the consultant teams be the ones to have best-in-class software and always on top of whatever's coming, so that it benefits us as a city. We're their client, they get to use their stuff, but we're their client, they're happy to do work for us. Richmond's fortunate that we've got almost $1.3 billion in transportation projects over the next 5-6 years, which we've got a city of 230,000 people. So it's a big chunk of change. So we're keeping all of our consultants crazy busy. They have the ability to try out new things, and then even sometimes consultants experimenting with hardware providers and other types of industry folks to test something on our streets. And so then we can have a demonstration pilot that's not only something between the curbs, but also an actual thing.
So this is another one I might get in trouble for because you touched a nerve on this one with me. There's nothing more frustrating than working in Miami-Dade County than our procurement. And anyone who's done business with the county or is trying to would agree. And I will tell you, when I first started, and here I am, the director of a department, and it took me 6 months to procure business cards, $11 business cards, 6 months. So, you know, you can imagine what a multi-million-dollar project goes through. So it's really frustrating, and I don't blame the procurement department. They're working under the rules and regulations that have been put in place over time. All of them well-intentioned, I'm sure. All of them a reaction to something that somebody did wrong. But, you know, it's completely inefficient. There are a lot of people who won't bid for a county contract because of the process, because there's no guarantee that even if they go through this arduous process, that they're going to be rewarded with the contract, because then politics enter the equation, and we are, well, I won't get into that side of things. But I don't have any solutions here, just complaints. It's frustrating. But yeah, I'm not trying to discourage you from doing business with the county. I just hope it gets better.
Come to Richmond. We are open for business.
And just in the tail end of your answer, I want that R&D. What's in
Sure,
the box?
Sure.
For the
Well,
future?
okay. So I'll just pull on maybe a real world example and how, you know, Andy, you mentioned something about accessing a consultant community to go and do that, and you know, maybe a derivative of that in our operations business is, you know, when you think about I said earlier, technology for technology's sake, right? Like, what are you really trying to accomplish? So, you know, I'll use the Sunrail example. At the end of the day, the state, our customer, they want safe, reliable transportation, and they give us metrics that they expect us to hold for availability, reliability, customer experience, transit times. It's up to us as the O&M provider how to go and do those things. And so, of course, you know, we're in the business of not losing money doing those things for our customers. So, you know, it puts us in a position where the public agency can be at arm's length to the how to go buy those things. If they were to go do it themselves, they would struggle with all those challenges. But we are very good at, because we invent a lot of that intellectual property, leveraging those tools. So the real world case would be, you know, in our operations and maintenance services contracts, we have invested a lot of money in technologies that leverage, whether it's AI or prognostics, things of this sort. You know, we use the term, how do you turn finders into fixers, right? How can I be more efficient predicting failures and reliability? And so the state, in that instance, they don't have to go issue the RFI, issue the RFP, hire the consultants, spend 18 months figuring out the thing to go buy, only to get to the point where they want to buy it and now it's no longer the thing to go buy. They transfer that risk to us. We make those investments and manage the toolbox, if you will, to drive the best outcomes for our state partner.
Alice, can I just add a comment to what I said? So to be fair to the county, I do think they have an expedited procurement process for technology, recognizing and acknowledging that technology moves at such a pace that you can't possibly, you know, go through these very long process. So I don't know much about it, but I do believe there's an exception or a waiver for certain things related to technology. So.
All right. Well, I want to take a few minutes to see if there are any questions, and then I'll come back and ask each one of you to just give us a glimpse of what you dream of for the future. So, all right, any questions?
I have a question. So Hannah, you talked about that very short window for that demonstration, I think it was in AV. So what's the next step to that, or did you find it useful? Do you expect to do more things like that? The title here is Next Mobility Era. What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, we have continued to partner with the university, and what came out of that was an investment on their campus to build out a rural test track. So one of the great mobility challenges is outside of urban areas, even though it's not really benefiting Greensboro per se right now, is solving that last mile in the rural communities, because the infrastructure looks really different there than it does inside of a city, and being able to train equipment to successfully navigate those places where there may not be great markings, where the streetlight system doesn't really exist, where the circumstances are just really, really different. So being able to partner with them to provide them this little bit of support they needed to do that allows us to then start thinking about those trips that start as a rural trip and become an urban trip, and changing the real fabric of how that trip gets delivered. So building on that partnership, being able to find more ways for them to continue to use this equipment that they've invested in and built out. And then that's also helped us start to think about what a autonomous microtransit shuttle could look like inside of our downtown, and what we would need to be able to facilitate that.
Yeah, and ours is similar, that in looking in whether it's pilot projects or the quick build projects or the long-term infrastructure changes that we're doing, again, since Zero is expanding car infrastructure, it's all about expanding walkable infrastructure, bikeable infrastructure. And when I say walk, I include the bus, so dedicated transit lanes and essential transit infrastructure, so that people don't have to drive their own car. They might own one car, they might own 6 cars. It's their freedom. They can move around however they choose. And whether the vehicles move themselves, doesn't matter. We already know that in many places, software, I mean, I'll say every place, even though it's not literally every occasion, every trip, but software doesn't get tired, you know, all those cliche things, they're cliches for a reason. Software doesn't get angry. Software's not tailgating. We see human beings. Yesterday, I was watching a Waymo behave nicely, and 2 or 3 people blaze through a red light. Like, we know this is how people behave.
Right.
There's, yeah, not Miami. No, I don't mean to insult Miami. Everywhere else. And I mean, even psychologists have looked into this and nicknamed it car brain, which is this what leads people to commit or justify antisocial behavior involving a car that they would otherwise just not do. Software doesn't suffer from that. So in the future of Richmond, perhaps we have vehicles that are moving around, some operated by human beings and others operated by software. But regardless, humans will be flourishing because they can so easily and conveniently walk and ride bikes to just go about their ordinary lives however they see fit.
Fantastic. So Javier, next mobility era for Miami. What's the future?
The future is the past. I mean, I really think we still need to get the
eVTOL.
things that we've been talking about for 30 years done. That's what I would like to see in the future. And yes, incorporate technology and innovations where you can to make those things happen and make them better. But honestly, I just want to fulfill the promises that we made to the voters 24 years ago when they passed the half-penny sales tax.
Gotcha. All right, Justin, you get the last word. What's in the R&D box? The future of mobility.
I'm going to talk about the future of mobility is unlocking the procurement environment so we can move forward with the technologies. It really is.
No secrets you want to
How fast do you want to go?
Really fast. Really
we have
fast.
those too.
All right. You know, I think really the future is that connected framework with autonomous vehicles and eVTOL and bringing all the modes together because people are ready for it. They want convenient. And I do think with autonomous vehicles, you know, we'll make a huge impact on congestion. We'll have platooning, we'll have safety, we'll have fewer crashes, maybe no crashes. On my way here this morning, 3 different places, it was between 8:30 and 9 a.m., and there was a maintenance vehicle blocking a lane, a rush hour in the eastbound direction. You know, so there's a lot of smart that we can add to everything we do. So I want to thank our panelists, our audience. Thank you. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alice.
as Alice said, applause for our audience as well. Thank you guys for sticking with us. We do have one very last panel, which is amazing. I just want to make sure, do we need a group photo? Did we do that already, Tere? We got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you guys very much. We appreciate you. Like I mentioned before, amazing speakers, a wealth of information. We do ask you, please, if you do want to have a quick chat with them, take it in the hallway, make it quick, and come back. So we do have our very last panel, which is a bunch of blockbusters, folks. Again, thank you for sticking with us. We have with us former mayor of Quito, Mauricio Rodas, who's going to start a conversation with some incredible thought leaders. We talked about infrastructure here. Now we're going to talk about how we're going to finance infrastructure. So I'm going to invite Mauricio and the panel up for a discussion. Thank you.
Jenny? Jenny?
I'm in the right place.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. During the last 2 days, we have been discussing the future of mobility. And I think that we all agree on the fact that, highly efficient mobility systems are fundamental to transform society, to improve people's quality of life. I think that we all agree on a need to advance sustainable mobility solutions, to decarbonize public transport, to foster new electric vehicle mechanisms. I think that we are all in agreement regarding that. Now the question is, how are we going to pay for it? Where are we going to get the money to fund these huge endeavors? And this is a particularly relevant question, given the fact that in cities where more than half of the world's population live, where more than 80% of global GDP is being produced, is also where the main mobility challenges are. And unfortunately, cities are confronted with an international finance system that was designed to fund national governments, not local ones. So it is in this very complex scenario that cities have to get access to finance these highly important and transformational mobility projects. So to speak about the type of challenges that cities are confronting in this space, but also to highlight the kind of opportunities that are coming up to identify innovative mechanisms to fund sustainable mobility endeavors in cities in the global north and in the global south, we have a fantastic group of speakers with us this afternoon, starting with Mr. Horacio Rodríguez Larreta, the former mayor of the city of Buenos Aires, Andrés Jaramillo, the CEO of BG Mobility, and Professor Jeannie Birch, co-director of the Penn Institute for Urban Research at the University of Pennsylvania. So, without further ado, we want to hear from our panelists, which, as you can see represent a great combination of public and private actors, people who have been working on this space for a long time, bringing different perspectives to the table and amazing experience and expertise. Without further ado, Horacio, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us. It's an honor to have you. You undertook a highly ambitious transformation in Buenos Aires regarding mobility. You developed highly effective projects facing very different political and fiscal conditions during your term in office. Can you share with us how did you sequence all of those interventions from the smaller ones, bike lanes, the expansion of the BRT, to then undertaking major infrastructure? How did you address the fiscal constraints that a mayor has to face, particularly given political challenging circumstances like you had to deal with, particularly at the end of your term?
Thank you, Mauricio. Regarding the question of the sequencing, the answer that it's not the right one is to follow a purely technical sequence in terms of what the mobility needs. I mean, even if the theory says that it could be the best one, in real life, it doesn't work like that. I mean, the sequence depends on the money you have and on the political situation, on the political strength you have to go ahead for the project. It's not following what the theory of mobility would say. Never. It's real world. When is the money, and when do you have the political authority and support to go for it? That first. Second, also in terms of sequences, what you need to have always is all the projects prepared and developed to the minimum detail, everything ready. Because you don't know in this sequence when is the timing that the money will show up, and when will you have the political support to go ahead for your project. You don't know, but you have to be ready for that. For a big project, once you decide it, if you start there with all the detail, the engineering project, if you need to approve a law in Congress or whatever, it can take 2 years before you put the first brick. 2 years with reality. And in those 2 years, if you have the project prepared, probably the political support you have at the beginning, a year later, it's gone. And you couldn't even start the project because you were not prepared, and then the political window closes. So in terms of sequences, the first you have everything detailedly prepared, all the paperwork. If you have to sign a contract with the contractor, you need to have prepared to the detail. So once you have the support, you start the project. You cannot waste time. I mean, support comes and goes much faster than you can imagine. That's first. For example, in our case, I started as the second to the mayor 20 years ago in Buenos Aires, and we have a national government very much against us. Very much. I mean, they didn't give us a peso in 8 years. They didn't allow us to get money from the international organizations, nothing. So sequence on that. At that moment, we started with the cheapest projects with high visibility to become gaining political support. So we started with the BRT system, which compared to, I don't know, a metro investment is much cheaper. Even with that, we have a strong fight with the national government because they say that we will destroy the city. We put the first BRT line in the most visible and iconic avenue of Buenos Aires. We knew it would be very controversial, but we also knew that if we won that battle, everything there was so visible that everything after that is going to be much easier. And that's how it worked. I mean, we had a fight. It was like a national issue. The president being against us, saying that we're destroying the symbol of Buenos Aires and it's going to be a chaos in terms of congestion. The high visibility took the fight before gave us a higher visibility when it worked very well. So one, probably the most important thing that increased the acceptance, in the polls for the mayor that he ended up being present was this project, a mobility project. So after that, no one else discussed when we planned, when we announced we will build a new BRT line. So the sequence was driven by reality, by the chances, by the possibility we had in terms of political support, and they were very cheap projects compared to the big ones we could make after that. Once the mayor was elected president, and I was elected mayor, the very first day we started with the projects, with the big ones that we had prepared for years, because we knew we had a chance. Of course, we were not sure that he would win the election, but we had we would have a chance. So when he was elected, the next day we published the licitation, the tender. Yes, we published the tenders to start with the works. The very next day, we had everything prepared. If he hadn't won, well, those papers would be, I don't know. So everything very well planned, because these big works take time then. The Paseo del Bajo, which was the largest one, was like a road to enter to the port, to take out the trucks that before that they were in the middle of downtown to enter the port. So they blocked all the traffic in the most dense area of Buenos Aires. So it took 3.5 years of a 4-year period of as president, as the mayor. Both have the same 4 years. So luckily we could start, not luckily, we were prepared for that. We started the first day and we finished almost a couple of months before we ended our period. Again, plan before. I have elections for being mayor in next term starts in December next year. I'm already working today in the paperwork of the 2 or 3 main projects I'm planning to do, because I know that if I don't have, even if I'm elected, I won't finish the projects in 4 years. In terms of the money, which is the big issue, again, it depends on your political situation. For the first 8 years, we didn't have a peso, 0 from national government. Again, when my mayor was elected president, I took advantage of that, everything prepared before. The country put some money on the city. Of course, we were very ambitious at that time, so we got all the money that we could from the national government. We could apply to loan through the international banks that needed a signature from the national government. But also, and let's say probably half of the investment, we got from the strategic selling of public land. For Buenos Aires, a lot of money. We raised like 1.5 billion in a 4-year period, selling the strategic land. That again, at the beginning, for the first projects, big discussion, the opposition saying that we were selling the city and all those things. They tried to block. We made a deal with people. We said that for every piece of land we sell, it's going to be 1/3 for the developers that they can buy and develop, and 2/3 for public space, mainly green, mainly parks. And as people saw in the first one that we did it, and the park was there, it helped then for the approval of the next projects. But we raised a lot of money for that. More than half of the whole investment we did, the money came from the selling of land, in which there is a kind of virtuous circle, because once you get the money to make a project, the project improves mobility. In general, the land around that project also increases values. So, I mean, you have more money, and again and again. So it's a virtuous circle, but in our case, worked very well.
No, thank you so much for that, Horacio. That what you mentioned resonated very much with the kind of challenges that I had to face when I was mayor of Quito, because of adverse political conditions. And unfortunately, that's the case in many cities around the world. And the problem is that many crucially important projects are prevented from being developed because of political blockade.
But let me tell you, there are many others as important as those that when you have the political support, you don't have the project ready.
Exactly.
It happens.
Yeah. Planning with anticipation is also key, for sure. Andres, BG Mobility has a quite innovative and I would say very successful financial model by which you separate asset ownership from operations, which of course reduces upfront costs for cities. What kind of financing structures or de-risking mechanisms have proven most effective in attracting private capital at scale? And what kind of procurement or policy changes are still needed to expand this model across cities in different contexts?
Mauricio, thank you. The good news is this is not very innovative, okay? So let's go a little bit to history. 3,000 years ago, there was these guys, the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were excellent navigators. They say that they were the inventors of navigation and very good sailors. And these guys, they were so good that they started building boats and leasing the boats to the different users they could have. And they have two models. They can lease a boat, only the boat for trade, because this boat will go for a long time from port to port, or they can lease a boat with the sailors, and it was a boat that was moving people from one place to another and coming back, and it was a short-term lease. That was like Hertz, or Budget, or Avis. The other one was the long-term contract. So this model was invented 3,000 years ago, and what we are doing now is we found that in many places, the buses for public transportation have to be from the operators. In the past, when you were an operator, especially in Latin America, and this is in most of the transport systems, the owner of the bus, the owner of the truck, the owner of the taxi was the same driver. When you start putting these companies together, you get companies that have a lot of assets, a lot of vehicles, and renewing the fleet is more difficult. So what we are working is a model that gives the property of the asset to one company that is an investor, and the usage of the asset to one company that is the operator and that's specialized in giving a good service. This model comes from the UK, basically, when they started renewing all the trains in the Roscoe model, and it works really well. What we need and why it's working really well is because it has a political support where it's working. And when you have clearly who is going to pay you, because understanding, and we have two former mayors of two very important cities here, but if you have a contract for 15 years, you will see 3 or 4 or 5 mayors that can change the conditions of what you're doing. So if you have clearly how you are going to get paid, how is the revenues going to go to you, how is the waterfall of the income of the different operations going to work, it's really, let's say, easy to put one of these operations to work and be able to separate this, having control by the city of the assets, because the assets are only for that purpose. Being a public service, they need the buses, they need all the vehicles to be available.
Thank you. Andres, what do you think are the main challenges for expanding this model in different cities in the region? If you have to name around the top 3 challenges that you see.
Yeah, the 3 challenges that we see is, first, the operators. The operators in many places still want to be the owners of the asset. If you go to Mexico, for example, what you will see is that the owners today of the transport companies were the drivers 10 years or 20 years ago. So for them, being the owner of the bus is really important. It's part of how he grew. So one is understanding what they are doing and how you put them to work. Second is having the possibility to separate the ownership from the operation, and this is This is something that is also strange. In many places, and we mentioned it yesterday with Mauricio, Quito, Lima, and other countries, many of the obligations of the operators is to be the owner of the bus. They couldn't even have a financial lease because it was forbidden, and it doesn't make sense. Having a leasing is a really good financial solution to buy buses, and it was forbidden or is still forbidden in some places. So when you get availability to separate it, and when you get availability to separate the payment, it works. And also the other thing is understanding that buses, in this case, are fixed assets. Being fixed assets, you have a fixed payment for them because you are paying an investment in a period of time. You cannot pay them by kilometer or per passenger because it doesn't work.
Thank you, Andres. Ginny, the SDSN Global Commission for Urban SDG Finance is working on the creation of the Green Cities Guarantees Fund as a catalyst instrument to unlock investments for urban infrastructure. In your perspective, what are the key design features, either governance, risk allocation, or institutional partnerships, that will determine whether such a facility would prove effective?
That's a great question, Mauricio, and seemingly a simple answer is required, but it's not so simple. Not every city has the benefit of Buenos Aires and the talent of a mayor who knows how to create self-revenues. Not every city has projects ready to go. Not every city has the kind of bus systems that we're talking about. So those are things that have to be in place, first of all. But let's think about overall what the issue is and what the need is over time. We know that by 2050, we're probably going to have 1 billion more urban residents in the world. In Latin America alone, which is already pretty much urbanized, 90% of the people live in cities in Latin America, the urbanization in greenfields is not really the problem or growth of urbanization. It's dealing with the transportation that already exists, either retrofitting it, upgrading it, or serving those places that are underserved, like informal settlements, or taking transportation to make it climate resilient. So we'll take that as sort of our case here. And we know that not all cities have the revenues in Latin America to do this, and they often turn to the international financing institutions, things called multilateral development banks. That's a fancy word for saying the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, or CAF. Those are examples of those. And these banks generally loan or have grants. Less than 2% of overall multilateral development banks is dedicated to guarantees, which seems rather odd because guarantees really are very, very important. And when these banks do engage in guarantees, they're usually doing it for small and medium-sized enterprises, not for the kind of development projects we're talking about. So number one, the banks do have experience in creating guarantees. But number two, they're not doing it for the kinds of projects that we need. Nonetheless, there is thought now that this should be a technique that we should use. And why are guarantees effective? They're guaranteed, they're effective because, first of all, they don't demand the full allocation of the capital. It's like an insurance, capital is put aside, but you're not giving it out unless there's a failure, and of course, hopefully there aren't too many failures. Second of all, there really are very low claims there's a history of low claims because usually the projects are good. And lastly, they allow for loans that otherwise might not be given because they de-risk a situation. And in fact, guarantees can leverage capital at very high rates, sometimes 3 to 15% more than times more. And over time, we know that guarantees have captured 5 or 6 times more capital than traditional loans. So it's a good tool. Why isn't it used? It's not used because it's kind of complicated, of course. And so as we thought about this, we had this brilliant idea. Let's start this fund. This will be easy. And then we started thinking about how you would do it. Should it be a standalone fund or should it be associated with some sort of unit? Clearly, a standalone fund would be hard to stand up. And we thought maybe it would be better to talk to some of these multilateral development banks and see if they might be interested in doing this. Well, it turned out the CAF is very interested in doing this because their member states, their members have said that they need to give 2/3 a third of their operations to subnational activities. So there's an opportunity that our mayor says, jump when there's an opportunity. And the question is, how would you structure such a thing? There are various kinds of guarantees, first of all. There are project guarantees, which are for individual projects like the BRT or like the bus operations, or they're portfolios of projects that could be gathered together. There are guarantees that are what are called credit guarantees. That's for performance, if you're not doing what you're supposed to do, and you're not making those payments. And there are something called political risk guarantees, which guarantee against government changing and the conditions of the repayment change or whatever. That never would happen in Buenos Aires under our new mayor, of course. In other places, it does happen. So we have to understand how those sorts of things work. We then went to look at what happens at a bank that does have its own guarantee facility, which happens to be the World Bank, which has something called the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, called MIGA. And just recently, the head of the World Bank has taken all the loan operations at the World Bank and put them into a guarantee platform at MIGA. So they'll be doing all of that. Now, the one thing about multilateral development banks, and we just heard about this from our mayor, that you have to have the approval of your national government in order to get a loan from them or even a guarantee. So that is simply a problem that comes up quite frequently when national and local governments don't agree or the priorities are different. However, we discovered that in the World Bank, they do have a provision that it's got a long name. It's called the Non-Honoring of Sub-Sovereign Financial Obligations, big long name, initials, which allows for guarantees to be given to non-sovereign, without a sovereign guarantee. Well, then we said, well, this might be interesting, because why don't we look at the pattern and what are the requirements for this? Because the key thing in any guarantee is the risk, understanding what the risk is of any project. And so we looked into this, and we found that basically there are some protections that were built into this kind of system. First of all, there would be no guarantees for anything that had a less than a B minus credit rating at the national level. This is for MIGA. So again, you would consider some of these things. The other conditions include that the financial obligation has to be unconditional. It can't be challenged, whatever that project is or the agrees of the contract. And lastly, there is no arbitration trigger. It's the payment is what it is. And then there's the ability to subrogate. Subrogate, what does that mean? I said, I went to dictionary. It means can you take on be the creditor once you've paid off the claim? Can you then be the creditor and go after people? And so if those conditions are within that contract, then that helps alleviate the risk. In other words, you're guaranteeing a pretty high, but not exceptionally high credit rating places. You are have a permanent payment that is contracted. There's no arbitration. There's no one getting around what that payment is. And if you have to pay off the claim, you can go after the payments yourself. So these are sort of things that we thought, well, you'd have to think about this. And why would we go and associate ourselves with an already existing institutions? Because they're doing this already. They understand what to do. What they would have to be worked on is the risk profile of each project. But that's going to be the question of our next one that I think Mauricio is going to ask me. And the last thing that we discovered, that often the guarantee entity is able to sell off some of their guarantees, a portion of their portfolio, which means they sell off to private reinsurance companies, and then they are able to have more funding to lend out, to give guarantees. So understanding all of these qualities, we thought, well, this is a way to think about how to structure what such a fund might look at, but we have to be very careful about all of this as we think about how you measure risk, because there is a fund that's collected, there are fees that are collected in any guarantee situation. The question is, how do you set those fees? What happens to those fees? How do you invest the funding that's put aside against the claims? And how are these written off against the balance sheet of any entity that's doing this? And we do know that, again, within the multilateral development banks, they have, in MIGA in particular, and again, this is something to think about, there are regulations within internal ones that govern the entity, as that there are certain debt ceilings, project debt ceilings, which can be have to be observed, and therefore that would be one reason to sell off some of your guarantees. There's rules against country concentration. You can't have a lot of money going to Argentina or Colombia, even though you might want to. And there's also a regulation for how to preserve your operating capital. So all of this would go into the conditions of how you set up such a thing, and we're in discussions with CAF about many of these details. But you can see a simple idea is quite complicated, but it has huge possibility in terms of its leverage situation. We just have to convince them.
Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you, Jenny, for that very comprehensive explanation of how a guarantee mechanism for cities would work. It is certainly much more complex than what it seems. But I agree that its transformational potential, is worth the effort, and I think that it definitely can become a game changer for many cities in terms of their access to finance for important infrastructure. Thank you for that. Horacio, major infrastructure projects like Paseo del Bajo, which, by the way, it would be great if you can share with all of us what it's all about, the Paseo del Bajo. But this type of major infrastructure projects that, in the case of Buenos Aires, combined finance coming from multilateral institutions with local value capture mechanisms, speak to the importance of blended finance approaches. Looking ahead, what kind of financing structures or public-private models do you see as most effective to unlock large-scale mobility investments, while at the same time maintaining fiscal responsibility and public value?
Well, the Paseo del Bajo is a kind of a tunnel we made because the port in Buenos Aires is in the middle of downtown. You have the port, and downtown surrounds the port. So all the trucks coming with the grains or everything that we export coming to the port, they had to go through downtown, through the avenues in downtown, making a chaos in terms of traffic. So the more the country was growing and exporting more, the more the chaos. So we made like a tunnel for the trucks to enter almost from the border of Buenos Aires directly to the port, taking them out of going in the avenues in downtown. That helped with the traffic a lot. Before going to from the port, and beside the port is the bus station. So before you went from the bus station to the border of Buenos Aires to go anywhere in the country, it took 45 minutes. Now it takes 10. That's why, like 10 minutes and 45 before. It changed a lot. It changed all the landscape, because before you had like a wall of big trucks. Now you don't see them anymore. They're in a tunnel. So it's a big infrastructure that helped a lot the flow of the traffic around downtown Buenos Aires. So, but it was a work announced almost 70 years ago. So all the government said we have to do this. We will. They all promised to do this. Nobody did it, and we did it. It was a 700 million project that we financed half with a credit from the CAF and half by selling land. In terms of, you were asking the finance structure. First of all, we have to be clear. In most of the cities, and for me, it's good policy, we subsidize the public transportation. In Buenos Aires, the metro, the tariff pays almost half of the operating cost. Almost half. You don't have, of course, any peso for investment. The bus is the same or even more. The bicycles are subsidized too. And I think it's good policy because the positive externality that has people leaving a car and taking a public transportation is immense for a city. So you have to promote that. We took it to the extreme that the bicycles in Buenos Aires for the first 10 years were free, zero. Because it was so important for the city that people get the habit of using the bikes. So that's why it's very difficult to think on private sector financing, putting the money on and taking the risk of systems that are subsidized, because the subsidy depends on political decisions. And as you were saying, it's not for one government. You need to be sure that you have continuity, and in a country so unstable like Argentina, it's impossible to get investment for systems that are subsidized. You have to think on something else. That's why I put so much emphasis on the selling of land as a way of financing. It's something, as far as my experience, not many mayors use. Of course, it's politically difficult. Of course, at the beginning, you face all the opposition, but there's a lot of money there. You don't have it in any account, so it's free money. Again, it takes time, it takes a political fights. A couple of projects I dreamt to do, I couldn't because I couldn't get the approval, but I got the approval of many. And it has the benefit not only of getting money that you use for mobility, but also on developing land that it was useless. There was nothing there. So it also it brings green spaces for the cities because you develop that land. So, and of course, if you have the chance of getting money from international organizations, it's very important. But for that, you need, in Argentina, I guess, and everywhere, the national government's approval. So again, politics come, again, as probably in any project. No?
What was the main obstacle you had to face to implement this land selling mechanism? Because I'm sure that there was not much precedent on it in the city.
Yes, two main problems. One is the opposition, the political opposition in the city council. Of course, to sell each piece of land, I needed a law. So I needed a special law, which means 2/3 of the city council. So I had to fight in any. I win a lot of the discussions, and I lost a couple of them. But political discussion with the political opposition always comes. No? I was named as the one to sell Buenos Aires. They of course take it to an extreme. But the only problem that it's not exactly the same, but is what I call the not in my backyard effect. You have small minorities always fighting. They claim they want to develop the city, but not beside their houses. So and those they shout very loud. I mean, even if they are a minority, for example, one thing we did, a huge project was to we have the trains with the barriers at the city level, which of course accounts for the traffic, it's dangerous in terms of security. We put the trains up. But for the one that was living in a flat, in an apartment, that in the 3rd floor, that now will have a train passing in front of the face, of course they don't like it. So they get 20 more of that, and you have people complaining against you. They are very loud minorities. And the huge majorities that are benefit for those kind of projects, they are silent. They will never make a demonstration saying that you are great because of the project. So the small minorities shout very loud. And anything important you do in a city, mainly in a dense city, we have so many people living together, it will affect someone. When we did the BRT, that for everyone in Buenos Aires today would say it was a great project. But because we moved the previous bus lines, we moved and put all together on a dedicated lane. But for the one that had a bus stop beside their small shop and moved the bus stop 2 blocks away to put it in, probably that shop got broken, disappeared, because he didn't have any clients waiting for the bus anymore in their shop. Well, and those people shout very loud. So again, you have to go against it, and you have to make sure that that minority does not represent the will of everyone or the benefit of everyone. And those others, they won't show up, but they vote. That's very important. They vote. At the end of the day, if the projects are beneficial for majority, they go and vote you. You can be sure of that.
I hope you all sympathize with the kind of work that mayors do. As you can see, it's very tough. Andres, from your perspective, what makes a mobility project truly bankable? And how should contracts and revenue models be designed in order to ensure long-term financial sustainability and operational performance?
Mauricio, I think that the most important thing is understanding the project and understanding how the cash flow is going to work. When I say understanding the project in terms of public transit or buses for public transit, let's say many of the water, the energy, the gas are services that are subsidized by the city. So having subsidies is not bad, because these are benefits that we are giving to the people that lives in the city, that pays taxes, and is what the city do for them. When you think that you were giving subsidies to transport, many cities were like frightened because they say, okay, we are subsidizing the driver or the owner of the company, the transport company. And it was difficult to understand for a long time. But when you start the separation of understanding what the asset is and taking it as infrastructure or as a concession, it's much easier. And why as a concession? Because governments have public works, let's say a bridge, where you hire someone to build it, you pay him, and the bridge starts working because it's something that benefits the city. But also you have something that is a concession. A concession is something that you build for 15 years, and you get paid by the use of that asset. So in transit, you have the tariff, you have the subsidies, and you have other alternative methods of how to pay for the asset. And for example, in Colombia, we have a restriction in Bogota, we have a restriction to use cars every day. But you can pay to not have the restriction. That money goes to a trust, and that trust uses the money to help subsidize the public transport. The parking in the streets. If you park in the streets, that money goes for the public transit. And those are things that you can use different money from people that are using vehicles to pay for the public transport, so more people try to move to public transport. So understanding how it works, understanding how the money is going to come from the tariff, from the subsidies to the asset owner is how it makes it financeable and make it work.
Horacio and I were talking about the Pico y Placa system, which, by the way, now that you brought it up, can you share with everybody how is it operating? And what do you think about it, by the way? Because that's something that actually, I think that Bogota was one of the first cities in doing something like that.
Bogota has something called Pico y Placa. Pico y Placa is depending in the last number of the plate of your vehicle, you can use it or not use it. So it started being like 2 numbers a day. Now it's pair or impair. So some weeks you have 3 weeks restriction, some weeks you have 2 days restriction. So it's really hard, because if you have a vehicle and you can only use it for 2 days in a week, it's tough. But again, you can pay and you can use your vehicle every day. And that money helps the people that are using public transportation. The debate is big about it, but people got used to this. What started happening is that people started like buying a second vehicle. So the mayors, our friend the mayors of the city, decided to start changing the combination of the dates every year. So buying a second vehicle was not a good idea. Our restriction today, at least in Bogota, goes from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. So it's not like easy to manage.
Has it encouraged public transportation use?
Yes. And it's there's a very special condition in public transportation, at least in Colombia, and it's every year we have a day with no cars in February. And it's a day that many people that had never used public transportation use it for first time. So when you see the usage of the system, it starts normal, and the day after that, it goes a little bit higher. And it keeps like that forever. And it's really interesting because it's the day that people start using public transportation because they couldn't use a car.
Thank you, thank you. Definitely a lot to learn from Bogota. Ginny, it is widely recognized that a guarantee does not turn a bad project into a good one. So, from your perspective, what kind of tools should cities implement in order to develop technically sound, bankable projects to really take full advantage of de-risking mechanisms as guarantees to invest in urban infrastructure?
Good question. First of all, as you said, a guarantee won't make a bad project a good project. So the fundamentals have to be right. You have to understand the revenues. First of all, you think about two parts of a project. One is the capital investment, and the second is the operating revenues. And those have to be taken into consideration. So you have to make sure on the capital side that you have done the kind of market studies, the understanding of what this project's going to do so that you can have some good estimate of what the revenues will be. We heard earlier today that the Buenos Aires, I keep turning back to the former mayor of Buenos Aires because they did a lot of work on thinking about how you would project what would happen with their BRT system, and their models did work out. So they had a sense of what the revenues would be for this, so that has to be done. You also have to have a sense of public acceptance because a project could be killed. You could have the best project in the world, it could be killed, but no one would, if you had political delays on the whole thing, that's the end of that project. Again, I'll turn to my friend Mauricio, who when he was talking about the metro in Quito, he was very interested in getting the metro going in Quito for climate change reasons, but do you think he told that to the population? No, he told them it was going to make their trip shorter, and that gets some public acceptance of the project. So how you market the project has to do with the leadership of who's managing that project. Obviously, you have to have the technical assistance at the levels that are where you're crafting that project. I'm looking at my friend from Puerto Rico, who's a planning commission working on this very thing, looking at infrastructure for a new project. You have to understand the engineering, and it all has to be really good in terms of the technical setup of that project. Obviously, you have to have a handle on the expenses as well and make sure that those expenses are taken care of in terms of monitoring. Have an idea of what the expenses are, but make sure that there's a monitoring situation so that they just don't get out of hand. We all know those projects where they get out of hand, and that's a disaster. And when we think about the kinds of projects we're working on, these are projects that are big, expensive projects. They're going to be around for a long time, so they better be well planned in terms of where they're going to be, and they have to be watched as far as that goes. So those are the kinds of things that you need to be thinking about over time. So when we think about a guarantee program, and we're talking about offering it to cities that might not have the kind of level of technical assistance, it has to be tied to technical assistance. Who's going to give that technical assistance? It has to be, it can be contracted out to people who are here at this conference. It could be academic institutions and so forth, but you need to have that kind of training to make sure that the projects are sound and attractive to the investor that just for a couple of reasons might not be acceptable. Maybe it's a kind of project for which there's not a history of good investments in it. And so you need to build up that history. And in order to get that history, you need to get the investment. In order to get the investment, you need to get the guarantee. So it's sort of a chicken and an egg situation. But basically, the project has to be fundamentally sound as best as you can do it from the point of view of its capital investment as well as its operating activities.
How do you see the current capability of cities, particularly medium-sized and small cities, to undertake this type of challenge?
This is where the leadership training is needed, both the leadership in terms of the people who are leading the projects, because Again, we had an early conversation. We heard how important the transportation project is to the political viability of a mayor. Being blunt about that, but it's a good project because it has visibility, you can sell it and so forth. But if it's constructed poorly and it doesn't work, you've got a problem. So that means you have to go down through all aspects of your city administration, your budget office, your planning office, your engineering office, all of those need to be in place. And so that's calling for a tremendous amount of education and training that we're all responsible for.
Thank you, Ginny. I have one question for all of you. So if we are to move from pilots to large-scale mobility transformation, what is the one change, one reform in policy, regulations, or financing that you think would most accelerate investment while ensuring long-term sustainability and public trust?
Trick question.
Hello? First of all, no pilots. Don't do pilots. Because a pilot is a situation in which the one that promotes the project, he makes the pilot with, makes everything to be perfect in a situation that then it's impossible to replicate at a large scale. So they never work. Always they will do anything for the pilot to work perfectly, because that way the government will finance the project of that area of government, so he will present excellent results that are impossible to copy again when you go to a large-scale project, so no pilots. Second, for me the most important is the will, the determination, the decision of the leader, being the mayor or the Ministry of Public Works or whoever he is. I mean, there are so many reasons not to do the things. It's always risky. You're in government, things are going quite well. Why the hell would I get into that risk of doing a big project that always has risks? Always you will have the not in my backyard effect, and the small minorities always will show up complaining you or insulting you, that's more common, because you're putting a new, I don't know, road in front of their houses. Always they show up. And then the opposition will taking what those small groups are saying, the opposition saying that you don't take into account poor people, they are losing their houses. All things I'm sure you as a mayor have heard many times. You need to have a strong determination. That's more important than any institutional framework that, of course, they're important too. No? So to develop an institutional decision-making process in which the voices of the silent majority is also taken. But again, don't expect much on that. Only expect that they will vote you at the end of the day. But in terms of voices, the small minorities, so you need the strong determination against it. Otherwise, as I said, there's millions of reasons not to do the things, not to do the changes.
Determination, political leadership,
will.
And clarity of objectives.
Definitely.
That's very important. Andres, agreeing with the fact that we should abandon pilots.
Yeah, I have the same answer as Horacio. It's really easy. No pilots. If you are going to do a pilot with electric buses, then you buy the bus today. You receive the bus in 1 year. You use it for 2 to try it. So it will take you 3 years to take the decision to say, okay, we are going to use electric buses, and they will arrive next year. So it will take you 4 years to start a project if you make a pilot. The pilot was already done by other cities. Don't do it.
And what would be the one change that you would think most valuable, either in policy, regulation, or financing?
I have to repeat what Horacio said, public policy. If you have the decision of the government, you are in the other side of the road.
Ginny?
Well, we're going to be in agreement, but differently. I think it's leadership from top to bottom. It's leadership at the national government that creates the enabling legislation that allows Mauricio and my friend here to do what they want to do. It's leadership at the local government level to have that will. It's leadership in the agencies, the units within government that understand what you're doing, so that they understand that what the things that the mayor wants to do, which is conforming with the leadership of the national government, allows you to do. works. And so you need leadership, 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 all the way top to bottom.
No, I completely agree. If you need a pilot to prove that an electric bus is better than an old one, you don't deserve to be a mayor.
But
you
if
don't
your mayor
need a
doesn't
pilot
have,
for that.
but if your
I mean,
mayor doesn't have power to do anything, because the
of
enabling
course, if you have the
legislation
power,
doesn't allow.
it's an excuse. It's a way of delaying. So you, at the end of 4 years, you have 3 buses. The pilot.
And a new mayor.
A new major, yes.
Now, before we get this we take this to a close, let's talk about the future. So, in 1 minute, can you share with us how do you see the future of cities financing sustainable urban mobility?
I don't know. No, really. I think an organization like this should fight for that the international organizations, the World Bank, the ADB, they go directly to the cities. That would be a great step. In Argentina today, if you are a city, you need the approval of the national government. You can get any peso, any dollar for anything without the signature. So for that, it always ended up in a political pressure on the political friends. They get the money and there's no. So we don't get access for big money. So that would be a very, very important change.
In LATAM, what we have in LATAM is basically in all the countries in LATAM, the total cost of ownership of going electric is better than going diesel or CNG. That's completely clear today. So going electric is you don't have to think it. It just you have to do it because it's much better to go electric first. Second, you don't have any risk in the operation and the cost of oil in the future because you can have contracts of energy for 5, 10, or 15 years, knowing exactly the price today. So it's a much better and much controllable operation going electric than doing anything else with different alternatives of fuel or CNG. So going with these projects, going electric, and having the right political decision to manage how to pay for this operation makes it clear to work.
I'm going to give a different answer. I think we have to understand how AI is going to shape cities and what the transportation needs are going to be. They may not be what we think they have been. People may be working more remotely. There may be fewer jobs. There may be different kinds of drivers that are creating the economies of cities. It might not be the service economies. It might be the arts and culture. It might be education. Who knows? So I think we have to start right now and think about exactly what our cities are going to look like in the future. What future is this? You want to know how many years, 10 years, 15, 20 years. But we have to really seriously address this particular problem of what kind of transportation are we going to need in cities of the future, both from the point of view of their functions, but also who's living in them, how old they are, and what their needs are.
And precisely to think about how to finance the future of urban sustainable mobility, 1 year ago, we launched Summit, a proud member of the CoMotion family, to bring together public, private actors, academics, thinkers, representatives from financial institutions to co-create innovative solutions to advance urban sustainable mobility. We have just launched our website. We encourage you to visit it. It's commotionglobal.com/summit. So you'll find some interesting case studies and good practices from around the world and ideas that are being discussed in order to redesign the way we are financing this very important endeavor. So we encourage you to visit the website and to get engaged with a Summit as part of the overall CoMotion global movement.
Mauricio, can I do an exercise?
Sure.
Who has a pension fund here? A pension fund. Who has a life insurance? Okay, all of you are investors in public transportation in the long-term projects. That's what pension funds and insurance do with the money.
So we are all stakeholders in this, as you can see. Well, thank you so much. It has been a wonderful discussion. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Jeannie, Andres, Horacio, and Mauricio for this wonderful panel. And we're really delighted, to be launching Summit. So please do discover what we're doing at Summit. And thank you so much. Thank you again. Thank you so much. And is this working? No? Oh, it works. Okay, perfect. So I just wanted to let you know that if you are looking to have a drink and to enjoy more CoMotion conversations, tonight we have a party with our partners, hosted by our partners, by Matt Dowse, the president of the International Association of Transportation Regulators. It will be in Fort Lauderdale, but there is a bus that will be leaving from here at 5 o'clock. Is that right, Matt? Perfect, and Matt is here, so if you are looking for more drinks and a party, off to Fort Lauderdale, there's a shuttle taking you at 5 p.m. from here and taking you back. And I think there are 2 shuttles, right? So you'll be able to leave at 9, or if you're really feeling like, talking more, all the way to 11. So there you are, Fort Lauderdale. And before we end, I want to give, first of all, a huge thank you again to Mauricio Rodas for everything he's done and for launching Summit. So thank you, Andrea Vivero as well, and Matteo, thank you for all your help. I also want to give a huge thank you to our team who make this possible, our program team, the incredible Vivian Mertetis. Thank you so much, Vivian. Hooray. Our Miami gal. Thank you to Shailene Beckton, to Jarell Sales, to Celia Zubarek, to our marketing and PR design team, Jake LaFoley, Jed Higgins, Marie Tobia, Nick Perloff-Giles, to our partnership team that make all this possible, Daniel Epstein, Alex Casales, and of course to John Rassant for his incredible vision. And, I hope that we'll see you at CoMotion LA because it's going to be our 10th edition. And I also want to thank all the production team because they make this possible. Photography, Tere Garcias, Miguel Gonzalez. On video, Luis Mendoza, AV, Ivan Martin, Art Garrido, Juan Mendoza. Registration, Ingrid Mendoza, Surel Genesis, Giselle Leret. Production, Carmen Embribes, Luis Montilla, Alejandro Mendoza, Jack Renza. Huge thanks, obviously, to Frank Ferrer, our production man. Thank you, Frank, and again, happy birthday. And to Séverine Maymoun, with it, nothing is possible. Merci beaucoup, Séverine. Again, thanks to all our partners, Miami-Dade County, the City of Miami, Miami-Dade College, what a wonderful place to hold this event, HNTB, Elevon by US Bank, WSP, Spain, ESEX, and also to all the CoMotion friends. I see Carlos here, C3, Carlos Cruz Casas, who made this possible, CoMotion Miami. I see Karina Ricks in the back. Thank you, Matt Dowse. Thank you so much to all the CoMotion friends, and see you in LA.